Gaius's men exchanged uneasy glances, their reactions showing confusion at this unexpected turn of events. "What new location, Gaius?" one of them asked, a puzzled frown deepening his features. "We obviously can't stay here. If that Frankenstein doctor tells Nathaniel Hawthorne about the call this idiot just made, he'll send Andrew and those damn puppets after us. Don't get me wrong, I had plans for them, but not before my surgery," Gaius replied curtly. "Surgery?" Christine repeated, feigning surprise as though hearing it for the first time. Her eyes flicked to Theo, drawing his attention, and she gave him a subtle wink. "I'm sure you mean my grandfather's surgery, right? You're all supposed to leave after the surgery," she said evenly, her tone light but probing. "Of course that's what I mean, Miss Powell," Gaius responded smoothly, his expression betraying nothing. Christine tilted her head slightly as though pondering his answer before shrugging and nodding in apparent acceptance. "Joseph and Richard will let us know once they've picked her up. If we don't hear from them in 15 minutes, we move. But we need a clear plan." "Can Powell be moved?" Theo interjected, his tone pragmatic. Meeting Theo's gaze and holding it steadily, Gaius replied, "I don't think we need to move Powell just yet. Like you said, if Joseph and Richard don't get back to us in 15 minutes, we'll move. We'll leave old man Powell here for now and arrange to move him later, once we have the Frankenstein doctor. But Miss Powell and Tom Hill are coming with us," he declared firmly. "I'm what now?" Christine exclaimed, genuine shock coloring her voice. "I'm not going anywhere with you, Gaius," she added, exasperation clear in her tone. "Don't worry, it's okay," Theo assured her, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "We're just being cautious," he added with practiced nonchalance. Christine opened her mouth to protest further, but then paused. She realized that if she argued too much, Theo might catch on that her supposed attraction to him was all an act. Tom Hill, who had been watching intently, suddenly broke into a fit of coughing, his frailty drawing everyone's attention. Christine quickly moved to his side just as Tom coughed up blood, a vivid stain marking the severity of his condition. A wave of profound fear rushed through her. She knew without a doubt that if Tom died, Nate would have her executed without hesitation or mercy. "I'm so sorry," Christine whispered close to Tom's ear. "Don't object to their plans," Tom whispered back weakly. Christine's eyes widened as the realization dawned on her. Tom had deliberately coughed to stop her from protesting. She drew back, met his gaze, and gave a subtle nod of understanding. "Can we have one of my grandfather's doctors take a look at Mr. Hill?" Christine asked, straightening her spine and adopting a calm, measured tone. "I keep talking, and it's as if you don't hear me," Gaius snarled, his irritation boiling over. He took a menacing step towards her. Tom noticed Theo tense up, his fists clenching at his sides, though he said nothing. "Then read my lips, Miss Powell. Tom Hill is not going to make it out alive. Your so-called care is pointless," Gaius growled, his voice dripping with venom. "That wasn't the plan." Christine shot back, her voice sharp with defiance. "I don't know if you're acting dumb or if you're just plain dumb. Do you really think I'd let Tom walk out of here alive? He has connections that could find us all and take us out one by one. Do I look stupid to you?" Gaius shouted, his anger echoing in the room. Christine silently assessed the room, her gaze flickering over the men. None of them objected to Gaius's words, not even Theo. The realization made her stomach drop. "You lied to me," Christine said, her voice trembling with raw, unfiltered emotion. This time, it wasn't an act. "It's time you learned that life isn't all sunshine and rainbows, Princess. Some of us figured that out a long time ago in this fucked up world," Gaius retorted coldly, his tone unyielding. Christine held his gaze for a tense moment, then said, "I'm getting him water." Without waiting for a response, she strode past Gaius. The other men instinctively stepped aside, letting her pass. As she left, she overheard Gaius's sneering remark. "Since you're so into that chick that you're willing to forget the mission, maybe you should shadow her. She's up to something. I know it." The comment sparked a heated argument among the men, their raised voices providing Christine with the distraction she needed. Leveraging the chaos, she moved quickly, determined to use this precious time to her advantage. Once out of sight of the supply closet doorway, she broke into a run toward the kitchen. The house was eerily quiet now. The staff had retired for the night. In the kitchen supply closet, she quickly retrieved bottled water of the same brand, opened 3, and poured the poison she had prepared earlier into them. Setting the poisoned bottles aside, she grabbed a different brand, tucking it under her arm as she carried the 3 tainted bottles out of the closet. Theo walked in, his sharp gaze flicking between the bottles in her hands and her tense expression. "Are you planning to help drown the old man, or what?" he quipped, his voice laced with sarcasm. Christine ignored him, placing the 3 poisoned bottles on the kitchen counter with deliberate calm. "I see I'm getting the cold shoulder," Theo said, leaning casually against the counter. "Look, about Tom, Gaius is right. You have no idea what that old man is capable of," he continued, his tone softening slightly. "That wasn't the plan, Theo. Gaius is breaking all the rules," Christine replied, her voice low and controlled. She wanted to say more, but Tom's cautionary words echoed in her mind, stopping her. "I'm sorry, but it is what it is. That's why we agreed to bring him in. He's a valuable asset to the Hawthorns, and I'm sure Dr. Hawthorne knows that. But she's also known to take stupid risks for strangers, not to mention someone this close home. Humans like that don't usually live long, trust me," Theo said, his tone tinged with a mix of resignation and arrogance. Christine's heart raced, her mind spinning. "What does that mean? Are you planning to kill Ariana too?" she asked, unable to hide the dread creeping into her voice. "No, but it's not like we'll just let her go immediately after the surgery. We'll need her to stick around for a while," Theo replied, stepping closer to Christine. Her back hit the island counter as Theo leaned in, his hands slipping into her robe to cup her back. His voice dropped to a whisper. "If you think about it, you'll see we're just being logical. And you don't have to be afraid of coming with us," he murmured before pressing his lips to hers. Lifting her effortlessly, he perched her on the island table, stepping between her legs as he deepened the kiss. Christine had no choice but to endure it. Inwardly, she fumed, imagining how satisfying it would be to make him drink one of the poisoned bottles. But she knew she needed Theo, for now at least, to keep Gaius in check until help arrived. She forced herself to play along, letting out a low moan and pretending to enjoy the moment. How he could think she had sex on her mind after everything she'd just discovered was beyond her. When Theo started to lose himself in the moment, his hands wandering with increasing boldness, Christine whispered, "Anyone could walk in, Theo," keeping her voice light and playful, masking her rising panic. "Damn it," he growled, stepping back reluctantly. "God, you taste and feel so good," he groaned. Christine playfully shoved him away, giving him a seductive grin, her eyes half-lidded as she bit the corner of her lip, teasingly. Inside, her stomach churned, but outwardly she maintained the act, knowing her survival depended on it. "I'm not looking for a quickie, Theo. You've got to work your way from here," Christine said, pointing to her lips. Slowly she trailed her fingers down her chest, past her stomach and between her legs. She added with a coy giggle, "All the way here." Theo cursed under his breath, darting a look towards the kitchen entrance, as if assessing whether he could take her right then and there. "Let me get this water to Tom before Gaius thinks he's won this round," Christine said with feigned determination, shifting the mood. Theo chuckled, his large hands gripping her waist as he effortlessly lifted her and set her back down. For a moment, Christine let herself absorb just how tall, strong, and imposing Theo was. His raw virility made her uneasy. She knew angering him would be a mistake. He looked far more powerful than Gaius, the kind of man who could break both her and Gaius like twigs if he wanted to. His build reminded her of the Hawthorne guards, men trained to protect but also capable of destruction. Her mind drifted to Jake, and a fresh wave of heartache washed over her. Losing him still felt like a knife twisting in her chest. As Theo leaned back, Christine reached up and cupped his jaw, drawing him into a kiss. She kissed him the way she would Jake, intense, filled with longing. Theo groaned into her mouth, his body taut against hers. When she finally pulled away, she saw the hunger darkening his eyes, the barely restrained desire pulsating between them. "Let's sort this out, okay?" she whispered, keeping her tone seductive and playful. "I'll escort you back," Theo said, his voice still heavy with want. Christine nodded, leaving the 3 poisoned bottles of water on the kitchen counter. Together they walked side by side back to the storeroom, her heart pounding with dread beneath her carefully maintained facade. Upon reaching the storeroom, Christine saw that Gaius was no longer there. Instead, 2 other men had taken his place, and they called Theo aside, leaving Christine momentarily unwatched. Seizing the opportunity, Christine quickly handed Tom the water and discreetly picked up his phone, which had fallen to the floor. Typing swiftly, she sent a message to Andrew. Joseph and Richard are by the Hawthorne estate gate waiting to pick up Ariana. Gaius is planning to change locations. After sending it, she deleted the message and carefully tucked the phone back into Tom's jacket. "What are you doing?" one of the men asked, his sharp tone slicing through the silence. Tom locked eyes with Christine and calmly said, "Thank you, it's really cold." Christine swallowed hard, her pulse racing. She stood and draped the jacket over Tom's shoulders, fighting to keep her movement steady as she ignored the man's probing gaze. When she turned toward him, his expression was one of clear disapproval. "Stop wasting your time with him," he muttered, his voice low and grating. Christine shrugged nonchalantly, masking the churn of fear and anger beneath her calm exterior. "You should go get dressed, Miss Powell. It's going to be a long night for all of us," the man added, his tone heavy with condescension. Christine's jaw tightened as she forced herself to smile, all the while imagining him choking on a poisoned bottle of water. The thought gave her a grim sense of satisfaction. She didn't want to leave Tom, not with their collective agreement to end him hanging over her like a guillotine. Still, she reasoned that since they planned to take him along, they would have to keep him alive for now. With practiced grace, Christine passed the man and exited the storeroom. From the corner where Theo stood with the others, she heard the murmur of whispered arguments but didn't glance in their direction. She knew she had to change. Her current outfit had already served its purpose far better than she had anticipated. Once in her room, Christine peeled off her lingerie and selected a more practical underwear set. Her heart pounded against her ribcage as her thoughts raced with escape plans in case the Hawthornes couldn't get to them fast enough. Just as she was fastening the last piece, a faint noise made her pause. She froze, her breathing shallow and quick, her pulse roaring in her ears. Then the closet door creaked open. Theo stepped inside. Christine's brain didn't have time to process anger at the intrusion. Relief flooded her when she realized it wasn't Gaius. But as Theo shut the door behind him and advanced toward her, the relief quickly morphed into fear. "Theo," she said, her voice quizzical, laced with an edge of uncertainty. The single word carried all of her unspoken questions. "What are you doing here? What do you want? Has something happened?" "It's been 13 minutes and we still haven't heard anything." "Looks like we'll be moving after all," Theo said, his voice low and deep, the undertone of his desire unmistakable. "I see." "I'm trying to get ready," Christine replied, striving to keep her voice steady as she reached for a robe. Her hands trembled slightly, but she quickly masked her nervousness. Theo stepped closer, closing the small distance between them. He lifted a hand and gently tucked a stray lock of her hair behind her ear, his touch deliberate and intimate. "You look amazing without clothes," he rasped, his tone sending a chill down her spine. "Thanks. May I get dressed now?" she asked, forcing a polite smile as she tilted her head up to look into his eyes. "I know you said you're not interested in a quickie," Theo murmured, his lips curling into a smirk. "But what if it's just a prelude to the real thing? I promise to deliver exactly what you want when we reach the new location." Whilst Christine silently prayed for the Hawthornes to derail those plans, otherwise she would be utterly doomed, trapped alongside Tom. "Gaius might come looking for us," she began, her voice raspy and deliberately playful. "Then we'll give him a show," Theo said with a dark chuckle, lifting her effortlessly and pinning her against the wall. Theo was surprisingly gentle with her, and something that had started as a calculated, seductive ploy slowly spiraled out of control. Christine felt panic rising in her chest, fully aware that this was never a line she had intended to cross, yet the situation twisted into something entirely unforeseen, morphing into an unexpected and fleeting moment of reprieve from the horror of the past days. It escalated so quickly that Christine didn't have the chance, or perhaps the resolve, to stop it. Moments later, as the two of them panted heavily, Theo groaned against her lips. "Shit," he muttered, his voice thick with profound pleasure. His lips brushed hers as he whispered, "I say we ditch this rapidly sinking ship and get the hell out of here. Come on, look at me." Christine's eyes fluttered open, locking onto his. She silently noted the deep green of his irises, vibrant and piercing even in the dim light. He nibbled on her lips before continuing. "Say yes, and I'll make it happen. I'll get us out." Christine opened her mouth to respond, but her throat felt constricted, choked with emotions she didn't fully understand. She was in uncharted territory, caught between conflicting thoughts and fears. "My, grandfather," she finally managed to say, her voice barely audible. Their faces were so close now, just an inch apart. For the briefest moment, Christine thought she saw something flicker in Theo's eyes. Guilt, perhaps. Theo sighed and kissed her softly before whispering, "I'm sorry, Christine, but this was never about your grandfather. He's old. You need to start thinking about yourself." Christine couldn't help but notice how he had used her first name, pronouncing it with a subtle omission of the first 3 letters so it sounded like Ristine. The way his deep, affectionate voice wrapped around the name did something to her, stirring emotions she didn't want to feel. It added to her inner turmoil, making her mind spin in a tangled mess of dread and confusion as he continued kissing her. The sound of the door opening made Theo curse as he quickly disengaged from Christine. She grabbed a robe to cover herself just as the door flung open. Theo was still pulling up his jeans when Gaius strode in, gun in hand. He took one look at them, fury blazing in his eyes, and raised his weapon at Theo. Theo let out an angry growl just as Gaius fired. For a moment there was stunned silence. Theo glanced down, his hand instinctively pressing to his side, and saw blood staining his fingers. With a roar of rage, he charged at Gaius. Christine screamed as the 2 men collided hard against the door, breaking it off its hinges as they tumbled out into the hallway. The gun flew from Gaius's hand, skidding into a corner, while Theo pinned him to the ground, raining furious blows on his face with guttural, animalistic cries. Then the sound of gunfire from downstairs echoed through the house, momentarily freezing Theo in place. In that pause, Gaius seized his chance and plunged a knife into Theo's chest, drawing a loud, agonized cry. Christine, paralyzed by fear, snapped out of it and bolted out of the room and down the stairs. Her heart pounded wildly as she navigated the chaos, avoiding the armed guards rushing toward the front door. She hid behind corners and furniture until she reached the room where Tom was tied up. Bursting in, she saw Tom's eyes widen as they took in the blood splattered across her cream satin robe. His face was pale, his voice weak. "What's going on?" he rasped with chest heaving heavily. Christine didn't miss that Tom was no longer tied to the chair. His hands bloodied and a dead man was slumped in the corner of the room. I don't know," she stammered, trembling violently, "but we need to get out." Her hands shook as she untied his wrists, ensuring he wore his jacket before helping him to his feet. She draped one of his arms over her shoulders and half-carried him toward the door. They barely made it before Gaius appeared, blocking their path. Christine flinched at the sight of him, battered and blooded, yet somehow standing. Her stomach churned with the realization Theo was dead. Gaius's eyes gleamed with malice as he swung the butt of his gun hard against Tom's temple. The older man staggered and fell to his knees with a groan. Gaius then turned his fury on Christine, grabbing her by the hair and yanking her close. His voice was a venomous growl. "I know you did something," he hissed. "The Hawthorne guards got here way faster than they should have if it was just Tom's call that alerted them. Oh, you're going to pay in more ways than you can count, Princess." He jerked her face even closer, pressing a brutal, punishing kiss to her lips that left them cracked and stinging. Christine whimpered, tears spilling down her cheeks as he yanked her hair back, drawing more sobs from her. "Help him up!" Gaius barked, his voice thunderous. Christine, trembling, reached for Tom, dreading what was yet to come. Christine helped Tom to his feet, her shoulders straining under his weight, as Gaius followed close behind, gun in hand. He directed them up the stairs, his voice sharp and unyielding. They reached her grandfather's suite, and with a swift kick, Gaius broke down the door. Inside, the doctors scattered to a corner, their faces pale with fear. Without missing a beat, Gaius strode to the bed, his gun aimed directly at Christine's grandfather. "Gaius, no, please!" Christine screamed, her voice desperate, but her plea was drowned out by the deafening cracks of the gun. 5 shots. The room fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the horrified gasps of the doctors and Christine's piercing scream, raw and guttural. Gaius turned to her, his expression a mix of rage and deadly intent. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her face close. "You did that! Let it sink in!" He snarled, his words cutting through her like a blade. He then gestured to the doctors, pointing toward Tom. "Help him! Go on! Lead the way out!" The doctors, too terrified to argue, moved quickly to support Tom and began guiding him toward the exit. Christine, trembling with rage and grief, lunged at Gaius, screaming, "Murderer! You fucking murderer!" Her fists pounded weakly against him, but Gaius struck her across the face with the back of his hand. She cried out in pain, stumbling as he grabbed her hair again, dragging her out of the room. "Don't worry," he hissed, his tone venomous. "I'll tame you soon enough." When they reached the first floor, Tom's gaze darted toward the chaos unfolding outside. The front of the house was a battlefield, gunfire and shouting echoing through the air. Gaius ignored it, instead directing the group toward the kitchen. The moment they entered, Tom noticed 4 of Gaius's men sprawled across the floor, clutching their throats and gasping for air. On the kitchen island, a collection of empty water bottles glinted under the lights. "Shit!" Gaius cursed, his voice exploding with fury. He yanked Christine's hair so hard, she let out a sharp cry of pain. "Did you do this, you witch?" he roared, his face contorted with rage. "You're hurting me!" She sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "You have no idea what pain is, but you will," he growled, his grip tightening. "Move!" He barked at the doctors, who hurriedly helped Tom towards the kitchen's back exit. Just then, another of Gaius's men burst into the kitchen, his face frantic. "Gaius!" he called out, then froze, horror etched on his face as he took in the sight of the men on the floor. "Holy Hades, what happened?" Gaius shrugged. "Find us a getaway," Gaius barked in response, his focus razor-sharp. The man hesitated, his expression darkening. "Were you leaving without us?" he demanded, his voice laced with anger. "Do you want to stand around chatting or get us out of here?" Gaius snapped, his voice a furious growl. After a tense moment, the man relented, stepping in to assist. He grabbed his gun and joined Gaius in holding the doctors, and Tom, at gunpoint. "Whatever happens," Gaius said in a low, cold tone, "kill Tom Hill." The man nodded. They made the doctors open the door, and Gaius and his accomplice ensured that Tom, Christine, and the doctors were positioned to shield them as they ventured out. "Don't shoot," Tom heard Anton yell. "Hold your fire," Charles bellowed. Tom took a shaky breath as he saw Aidan, Charles, Anton, and Jake step out from the shadows. "Ah, look who's here, Nathaniel's puppets," Gaius taunted. He didn't get a response. The 4 men just stood there, giving him stony stares. Only Tom understood the cold, unyielding gaze they gave Gaius. "There would be no negotiation, no escape. Remember what I said the last time we saw Gaius?" Charles said. "You said a lot of shit, old friend." "I don't remember," Gaius jeered. "You're not leaving here alive," Charles declared. "This house is about to be your burial site," Aidan added. Gaius laughed, a loud, maniacal cackle before he fired a gun directly at Charles. As the men took cover, he pointed the gun behind Tom's head, cocking the trigger. Christine removed a vial from her thigh belt, opened it, and, with a cry, pressed her face to his front, latching onto his fabric and skin with her teeth. Gaius recoiled. Tom fell to the floor as the doctors ducked when Gaius's gun went off. "Ah, you witch!" he shouted. Christine shoved the vial into Gaius's opened mouth. He recoiled and tried to spit it out, but it had already touched his tongue. With a cry, he raised his gun to fire at Christine, but before he could pull the trigger, a body lunged in front of her. Gaius fired twice, hitting his target, but he didn't get to pull the 3rd shot. Charles and Jake moved in a blur of motion, closing in on Gaius's side. Charles slashed a knife across his throat, just as Jake grabbed the hand holding the knife and broke it. Gaius croaked, his face frozen in a loud, terrified scream. The man holding Tom and the doctor's captive pointed a gun at Tom. One of the doctors tried to escape his grasp, distracting him. Tom seized the moment to plunge the pocket knife Christine had given him into the man's shoulder. The man let out a loud cry and tried to shoot Tom again. Anton grabbed the man from behind, yanked him up like a ragdoll, pressed a gun to his spine, and fired. Agonizing cries filled the air. Christine, terrified and shaking uncontrollably, saw the moment Aidan gave her a dismissive look, making no effort to help her. Even Jake didn't spare her a glance as he pulled the man who had shielded her from Gaius's gunfire away. She heard him say, "It's Theo," as he looked at Charles. "Is he alive?" Charles asked. Jake felt his pulse and replied, "Barely." "We need paramedics here," Aidan yelled. Two men in uniforms quickly approached with stretchers to carry Tom Hill and Theo. "Don't die on us now, old man," Anton quipped, patting Tom on the chest. "You'll ruin your reputation for good, and I don't want to see Dawn ugly cry." Tom broke into a fit of coughing as he tried to laugh. The paramedics carried him away. Hell broke loose as Jake, Aidan, Anton, and Charles started hunting down the remaining men. Christine wasn't sure how to act. This was the first time she had seen Jake again after their explosive confrontation, and he and his friends were acting as if she were invisible. Her eyes drifted to the retreating forms of the paramedics, a surge of gratitude swelling inside her toward Theo. He had saved her life. If he hadn't stepped in, Gaius would have taken her down with him, and she doubted she would have survived. It occurred to her, though, that while the Hawthorne guards had left the rest of the men to die, they made an exception for Theo, especially after witnessing how Anton had killed the man who had followed them out of the kitchen, and how Charles and Jake had killed Gaius. Christine, deciding to follow the paramedics, was only a few meters away from the van parked a considerable distance outside the mansion gate when a woman jumped down from the van. Christine cursed under her breath when she saw it was Dawn. "You fucking traitor!" Dawn growled, starting to sprint toward her. Dawn Hill had no fighting skills to speak of, no ninjutsu, no kung fu, no martial arts training, not even basic street fighting. But after the past few hours of sheer terror, thinking she might never see her father alive again, the sight of him battered and broken left her furious. Oh, that anger, raw and potent, surged within her, ready to explode at the woman responsible for making her father an easy target. Her world had come to a standstill when Anton called her back to the Hawthorne building to deliver the horrifying news. Her father had been kidnapped by mercenaries. "You have to be strong. We can't let anyone know, not your mom, not Dr. Hawthorne, not Anita." "Got it?" Anton had whispered in her ear. Trembling with fear, Dawn had nodded nonetheless. In Nathaniel Hawthorne's home office, she was briefed on what they needed her to do. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Her father had been taken because the mercenaries wanted to get to Dr. Hawthorne, but her father had refused to cooperate, refusing to make the call they demanded, and now he was being tortured. "How did this happen?" she managed to ask, her voice barely audible, thick with dread. "Christine Powell helped them," Andrew replied grimly, "but we'll get him back. We just found out there's someone among the mercenaries we can use. We just need you to pick up Tom's call and play along." Dawn nodded, her eyes drifting unconsciously toward Nathaniel. She could see the apprehension etched on his face, the unspoken tension in his rigid frame. Nathaniel was the son her father never had, and she knew how deeply the two men cared for each other. When Nathaniel caught her gaze, he crossed the room and pulled her into a firm hug. "We'll get him back. I promise you, Dawn," he'd rasped. That promise bolstered her courage. She figured if she were alone in this, there would be no hope. But this was Nathaniel Hawthorne, the powerful Nathaniel Hawthorne. And if he said her father would be saved, she believed him. It had taken every ounce of self-control not to break down when she finally heard her father's tired voice on the phone. She did what she was instructed to do, her heart screaming, "Stay strong, Daddy," while praying this wouldn't be the last time she'd hear him speak. When the team was assembled for the rescue mission, Dawn insisted on being part of it. She pleaded to follow Rowan and the two nurses from Evergreen Memorial, but Nathaniel refused at first. Only after Anton promised to keep an eye on her did Nathaniel relent. Before they left for the Powell mansion, Anton made her promise to stay in the van with Rowan and the other medical personnel. Will and Ash also swore to keep her safe. The echoes of the gunfight that followed were nerve-wracking. Relief washed over her at the sight of her father being brought back. He wasn't alone. Alongside him was a stranger she assumed was Andrew's inside man. Her father's face was a mess of bruises. His eyes were swollen and barely open. Still, he reached out a trembling hand to her, calling her name. Dawn broke down in tears, both relieved and pained by the sight of him. Rowan immediately took over, prioritizing Tom Hill as the nurses tried to stabilize the other man. He removed his shirt to examine the injuries. Her father flinched as Rowan's hands pressed against his chest and side. The doctor's grim expression said it all. "We are going to need a full body scan when we get to the estate. Meanwhile, tell me where it hurts," Rowan said. Dawn didn't need a medical degree to sense the severity of her father's condition. The bruises on his chest and stomach were a telltale sigh, and Rowan looked worried. As she sat in the van trying to keep herself together, her gaze fell on Christine Powell, strolling casually toward the van as if she hadn't just orchestrated this nightmare. The audacity of the entitled little bitch. Christine didn't even have the chance to run before Dawn lunged at her, grabbing her by the hair. Dawn delivered a stinging slap across Christine's face, immediately following it with a backhand before yanking her hair viciously. Christine let out a loud, pain-filled cry, struggling to wrestle her hair free from Dawn's grasp, but Dawn held tight. She continued smacking Christine's face and yanking her hair, all while hurling a stream of curses so intense that Will, watching from the van, thought it was the strongest language he'd ever heard from a lady. "Are you going to separate them?" Rowan called out to the two men lounging outside the van. Will rested his shoulder casually against the door, seemingly relaxed, while Ash stood with his thumbs looped in the belt holes of his cargo pants, observing the scuffle with mild interest. "Yes, Doc," Will replied, glancing sidelong at Ash, silently telling him to go break up the fight. While Will stayed back to guard the van, Ash sauntered toward the two women, unhurried. Miss Powell had no chance against the sheer fury of Dawn Hill, and Ash didn't seem particularly concerned. He figured the medical personnel on hand could patch Christine up if it came to that. As far as he was concerned, Dawn had every right to vent her anger. Christine Powell had brought this on herself. "You bloody little bitch," Dawn snarled. "I'm going to make you regret the day you ever heard the name Hill. You cold-hearted, demonic little troll." Christine squirmed beneath the assault, grunting and screaming in pain. "Get off me, you savage," she shrieked, trying and failing to free herself. Ash paused mid-stride, noticing one of his bootlaces looked uneven. Bending down, he took his time adjusting it while Dawn continued to dominate the fight. Watching from the van, Will chuckled softly to himself. "We really need to leave," Rowan yelled, his voice edged with exasperation. "Yes, Doc," Will replied calmly as he climbed into the van. "Let's go," he said to the driver, settling into his seat. Through the rearview mirror, he could see Rowan working on Theo before directing his attention ahead. All right, that's enough," Ash finally said as he reached the two women. Grabbing Dawn by the waist, he yanked her off Christine with ease. He didn't spare Christine so much as a glance. Instead, he carried Dawn, still kicking and screaming, back to the van and climbed inside with her before slamming the door shut. As the van sped past, Christine staggered to her feet, her hair disheveled and her face marked by the scuffle. "Come on," she cried out in frustration, her voice cracking as her chest heaved with sobs. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she stood there, utterly defeated. Meanwhile, inside the Powell's house, Anton, Jake, Charles, and Aidan enter through the kitchen, immediately noting the lifeless bodies on the floor. The pallor of their skin and the way their hands clutched at their throats provided a chilling hint of what had occurred. The scattered water bottles on the floor were further evidence of the deadly scene. Moving quickly, Jake and Charles took the lead, heading into the corridor that led out of the kitchen. They were met with gunfire. Ducking for cover, they fired blindly towards the attackers. Charles provided Jake with cover, maintaining a steady barrage of fire to give Jake the opportunity to advance. Jake darted down the hallway while Charles kept up the suppressive fire, aiming straight to maintain the opening for Jake. When Jake reached the end of the hallway, Charles ceased firing. Jake pressed his back to the side wall, waiting for the enemy to expose themselves. As one of the men stepped forward to shoot again, Jake grabbed his arm, yanked him out of cover, and stabbed him twice in the throat. Without sparing the man a glance, Jake roared, using the dying body as a human shield as he pushed forward. Charles, Aidan, and Anton followed closely behind. When they reached the lobby leading to the staircase and front door, they spotted 3 more assailants. From their hiding spot, Anton expertly threw a knife, striking one of the men square in the chest. The man slumped to the floor, lifeless, while the second opened fire in their direction. Charles unhooked a smoke bomb, tossing it toward the shooter. As the room filled with smoke, Charles and Aidan rushed toward the remaining assailants. Moving through the thick haze, Jake saw Charles lift one of the men off his feet and slam him hard onto the ground. Without hesitation, Charles raised his left leg and brought it down with brutal force, crushing the man's chest. Charles's speed and ruthlessness were undeniable, and Jake could understand the rage driving him. Jake reflected on how revenge could be a double-edged sword. Many sought it, believing it would bring closure, but it often left them feeling hollow. No amount of retribution could undo the original pain or loss. It simply added another layer to the torment. After the fight, they regrouped. 10 down, Aidan recounted, keeping track of how many were dead and how many were left to handle. Carefully hurrying up the stairs, they peered down the corridors before venturing further, checking every room along their path until they reached Powell's wing. Up ahead, they saw that the door was damaged and was left open. Jake instinctively sensed that this was where the 2 remaining men were hiding. Charles moved a step forward, but Jake placed a firm hand on his shoulder, halting him as he caught the faint sound of a whimper. Suddenly, about 5 half-clothed women stumbled out of the room trembling, while 2 men used them as human shields. "For every move you make, one of them gets it. I will not hesitate," one of the men shouted. "I never took you for a coward, Mercer," Charles taunted, his voice laced with disdain. "Hiding behind women. That's just pathetic. But on a second thought, you do know how to use women now, don't you?" "It's called survival, asshole," the man retorted. Jake's voice was cold as ice as he interjected. "You should have stayed out of my city, Mercer. And you too, Brooke. Now you'll never leave." In response, Mercer shoved one of the women forward and without hesitation shot her in the back. She collapsed to the floor, lifeless. Aidan reacted instantly, throwing 2 knives in quick succession as Anton shouted, "Duck!" at the maids. Some dropped to the floor, others scattered, creating an opening in the center. Brooke and Mercer scramble, attempting to dodge Aidan's knives while still holding onto their hostages. In their panic, they fumbled, leaving an opening for Jake and Anton. Jake fired, his bullet striking one of the men in the shoulder. Anton's shot landed squarely in the stomach, and Aidan followed up, shooting at their legs. Brooke dropped to his knees, groaning in pain, while Mercer stumbled back inside the room. Charles charged after him, but his confidence betrayed him. As he strode through the doorway, Mercer, lying in wait by the side of the door, lunged with a knife, driving it into Charles's shoulder. Charles grunted, grabbing Mercer's wrist to wrench the blade free. With a burst of raw strength and fury, Charles twisted Mercer's arm, forcing him to plunge the jagged knife into his own throat. Mercer croaked in sheer agony as Charles relentlessly drove the blade deeper and deeper, watching as life gradually drained from Mercer's body. Both men trembled from the intensity of the struggle, but Charles didn't relent until Mercer went limp. Charles let out a guttural growl then, haunted by a memory. A woman in an army uniform pulling the trigger of a gun pressed to her temple. The echo of the shot in his mind made him tremble as if reliving the moment. "It's done," Charles muttered, stepping back. Mercer's body slumped with a sickening thud onto the marble floor, blood pooling beneath him. Jake, Aidan, and Anton stood back, watching in silence, knowing better than to interfere. When Charles noticed Brooke still moving, he raised his gun and fired a single shot into the man's back, ensuring he went still. Without a word, Charles turned and walked out of the room, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Jake exchanged a glance with Aidan and Anton before their attention shifted to the bed. There lay Powell, already dead. Jake took out his phone and called Andrew. "Powell is dead, as are the Gaius team," he said as soon as the older man picked up the call. "And Theo, did he make it?" Andrew asked with keen interest. "I don't know. Rowan should be checking on him. He was shot multiple times," Jake replied. "Ah, shit," Andrew mumbled, cursing filtered through. "Did you get Joseph and Richard?" Jake asked, unconsciously holding his breath. "They couldn't afford to let any of the men escape." "Oh, yes, we got them," Andrew answered. Jake exhaled in relief. "Now I need you all to get out of there. Captain will take it from here," Andrew added. "Roger that," Jake said, and then ended the call. The 3 of them headed out. Upon reaching the corridor, Aidan stopped to crouch down beside the maid Mercer had shot. Using his gloved hand, he checked her neck for a pulse, but she was out cold. He straightened up and shook his head when his gaze met Jake's. The three men walked past the frightened staff and continued on. Downstairs, they joined the other Hawthorne guards that were on the lookout. Jake noticed Christine trudging back through the gate. She looked worse than she had earlier. And while he wondered what had happened to her, he wasn't interested in getting tangled in her mess. "That's a wrap. Let's go," Aiden shouted, and the tall, hefty men started to form a group, milling past two men in lab coats. And then Christine. Christine panicked when she saw the men were leaving. "Please, please don't leave me here like this," she cried out loudly. Aiden strode past her without sparing her a glance. Jake did the same. "Jake, please, this was all my grandfather's idea," she called out, pleading. Jake didn't stop. Anton, however, did. He paused, leveling a cold gaze at her. "If I were you, I'd get a good lawyer, Miss Powell. It's going to be a terrible season for you," he added, then kept walking. "Nate was supposed to help me," Christine cried after them. "He did," Jake called back over his shoulder. "Otherwise, you would have been the first to die," he added, his voice cold and detached. Christine fell to her knees, crying. The cold weather was nothing compared to the chilling shunning from Nathaniel's men who, at one point, would have given their lives to protect her. "I'm sorry, please," she sobbed brokenly. Aiden's lips twitched in amusement at Jake's remark to Christine Powell. He suspected Christine might think Jake was simply being cruel, but Aiden couldn't help wondering how she'd react if she knew it was the absolute truth. If she hadn't made that call to Andrew asking to speak with Nathaniel Hawthorne, Christine would likely have died alongside Gaius and his men. One other stroke of luck had been Gaius including Theodosius Duskmore in his team. When Christine mentioned that one of Gaius's men went by Theo, they hadn't been certain it was Theodosius Duskmore. To confirm, Charles had cautiously asked Christine to describe the other men, deliberately phrasing the question to avoid alerting her of their intentions. Christine had proven she couldn't be trusted, so then it would have been foolhardy to expose their ace cards. Her description, coupled with who they'd seen Gaius with a few nights earlier on the Powell's balcony, helped them match faces to names and create a lineup. After running through the possibilities, they determined that Gaius had mixed his usual crew with 5 new others, one of whom was indeed Theodosius Duskmore. The connecting thread among them? They had all served in the Marine Corps at the same time. Once Gaius's objectives became clear, it made sense that he'd want at least one somewhat honorable person on his team. A role they figured he'd given to Theo. But Gaius hadn't anticipated the flaw in this choice. Andrew, Jake, Charles, Anton, Aiden, and most of the Hawthorne guards already knew Theo. Theo had once been considered for recruitment into the Hawthorne team, but his mercenary nature ruled him out. While most of the Hawthorne guards sought stability, Theo thrived on chaos and war. That didn't make him inherently bad, but it did make him unsuitable for the Hawthorne team's standards. Andrew wasted no time in calling Theo directly, avoiding a text to prevent any risk of interception. He let the phone ring once before disconnecting, then waited. About 10 minutes later, Theo's familiar voice came through the line and everyone breathed a collective sigh of relief. Suddenly, Tom's odds of survival seemed much higher. "You know, it stings a little that I'm the one you pegged as the Judas here," Theo said as soon as the call connected. "I wouldn't say Judas per se, Duskmore. I prefer the word sensible," Andrew replied. "Don't try to butter me up now, Andrew." "That's highly unlike you, Major McLeod," Theo quipped, his tone light. "I wouldn't even dream of it. I'm sure you already know what I want. Name your price and keep Tom alive," Andrew responded without hesitation. Theo immediately stated his fee. "Same account?" Andrew had probed. "For sure," came the reply. "I'll have it sent to you right away," Andrew assured him. "And Miss Powell?" Theo asked, his tone low and calculative. Nathaniel interjected with a dry remark. "It's her party, Theo. We just hate being invited," he delivered. "Aye, aye, Captain," Theo responded, amusement showing in his voice. "Just make sure I get to spend that money, Andrew," he had added. "We take care of our own, that I promise," Andrew replied firmly. When Tom finally made the call using his phone, it disrupted the live stream tracking what was happening to him. Coincidentally, after their conversation with Theo, the feed was restored, allowing them to hear Gaius's reaction upon discovering they were on the Powell's property. Gaius had ordered one of his men to get Tom. They listened as Tom struggled with the man, insisting he wasn't going anywhere. Then came the unmistakable sound of a door opening, followed by a gasp, and then the heavy thud of a body hitting the floor. Moments later, Theo's voice came through the line. "Hang in there, Mr. Hill. Gotta make this convincing." At that instant, they knew Theo had switched sides. That was the terrifying thing about people who could be bought. They had no shred of honor. They could never truly be trusted. When Theo had subtly inquired about Nathaniel's stance on Christine Powell, and Nathaniel responded that she was on her own, it was clear where she stood with the Hawthornes. But then, if Nathaniel had asked Theo to slit her throat instead of simply dismissing her, Theo likely would have done it, for the right price. Anton fell in step beside Aidan, snapping him out of his thoughts as they both hurried to catch up with Jake. When they reached the jeep that had brought them, they found Charles in the back seat, attempting to patch himself up. Anton climbed in beside him and offered to help. Once everyone was settled, the jeep took off, joining an entourage of black vehicles speeding away from the area. Jake sat in the front passenger seat, leaning back against the headrest. Images of Christine's battered demeanor flashed through his mind, and to his surprise, he felt utterly hollow inside. The realization unsettled him. How could someone who seemed so important to him weeks ago now feel so irrelevant? Was this simply human nature? Had he shut down his emotions so far that it was impossible to switch them back on where she was concerned? Or was it a sign of something colder and darker within him? The question gnawed at him as the convoy raced through the night. He let out a sigh, relieved that Tom Hill was alive and that this whole Powell mess was finally over. At least on their side, he could only imagine the storm about to descend on Christine. With her grandfather gone and Nathaniel choosing to let her face the full brunt of it all, he hoped she could use her cunning to find a way out. Otherwise, he doubted she would escape jail time. The authorities weren't known for leniency in situations like this, especially when officers of the law had been killed. Taking a deep breath, he exhaled slowly, deliberately shifting his thoughts to the idea of returning to Evangeline. His posture relaxed, and his facial muscles softened at the thought of her and their son. Back at the Hawthorne estate, Nathaniel, who had been on edge since the ordeal began, shut his eyes in relief when he heard that Tom had been rescued. A deep sigh escaped his lips. "How is he?" he asked in a low, gruff voice. "They're on their way back. Rowan wouldn't say how badly he's injured, but they've got him," Andrew replied. Nathaniel rubbed his hands over his face, the stress of the past hours finally catching up with him. He suddenly felt exhausted. Alex, who had stayed with him the entire time, got up from his corner seat to stand by Andrew. Ethan was now sleeping on the couch after refusing to go to his room, though the medication he'd been given had knocked him out. "Do we need to tell Arya now? Do you think they might need her?" Nathaniel asked, his voice tense. "I'm not sure. Let's hope not," Andrew replied. He knew that if medical intervention required Dr. Hawthorne's presence, it meant the situation had become critical. "What about the Theo guy?" Alex chimed in. "They're bringing him too," Andrew answered. Nathaniel met his gaze, furrowing his brow. "Do you think that's a good idea, though?" He didn't trust Theo. While the man had been useful in rescuing Tom, letting him loose on their estate, wounded or not, felt like a security risk. "Don't worry, boss. I've got it covered," Andrew reassured him with a smirk. The medical van carrying Tom and Theo was the first to arrive at the Hawthorne estate. Dr. Yen, Dr. Sterling, and Dr. Williams were waiting as the van pulled to a stop in front of the concierge medical unit. The two patients were immediately moved to separate privacy shields, and Tom was rushed to the X-ray machine for a full body scan. Dawn and Will stood close by, along with a few of the Hawthorne guards who had been waiting for their return. The scan didn't take long. Tom was brought out, his tired eyes drooping. Dawn kept calling out to him, urging him to stay awake and conscious. The digital imaging showed signs of broken ribs and bruises to his chest cavity from repeated brutal blows. Within minutes, the scan clearly indicated Tom Hill's prognosis. Rowan quickly noticed the most critical issue. His liver was lacerated and he was bleeding internally. They needed to repair it immediately. "Let's prepare him for surgery," Rowan said to one of the nurses. Dawn burst into tears at the words. Will gently pulled her close, patting her on the back. "He's going to be fine, Miss Hill," he said in a low, gruff voice. Dawn wiped her tears, though new ones kept flowing. "Thank you, Will," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. As they carried Tom back on the stretcher, Dawn saw her father looking at her. He smiled weakly and she rushed to him, gently pressing her face to his side. "Hang in there, Daddy," she whispered. Tom's heart ached at the anguish and plea in her voice. When his eyes flickered toward the opening of the shield, he saw Nathaniel stride in, flanked by Andrew and Alex. Dr. Hawthorne was right ahead of them. Tom's heart shook within his chest at the sight of their anxious gazes. "We're preparing him for surgery," Rowan explained to Dr. Hawthorne as she approached. Dr. Hawthorne pulled Dawn into a hug, then gave Tom a searching gaze, her eyes filled with worry, her brows furrowed as if lost in thought. Nathaniel placed a hand on Tom's shoulder as the nurses continued their preparations. "It's good to have you back. Let's not do this again, okay, old man?" Nathaniel quipped, trying to lighten the mood. Tom nodded, tears streaming down the sides of his eyes. Dr. Hawthorne smiled at him and pressed a kiss on his brow. "It's going to be fine," she said softly. Tom nodded. "Tell me where you need me, Rowan," Arya said, stepping back. The nurses immediately ushered everyone out as they readied for surgery. Rowan and Arya quickly sanitized their hands and changed into scrubs, hurrying to Tom's side, just as a nurse began administering anesthesia. In the other privacy shield, Theo had also undergone a full body scan to determine the extent of his injuries. The scan revealed a fresh gash to his side from a gunshot wound, a knife wound on the other side, and 2 bullets lodged in his back. One bullet was dangerously close to his spine, while the other was in his shoulder. Dr. Hawthorne?" Yen called out hesitantly, knowing the patient's condition had just become more complicated. "I'll be right there," Arya responded. Earlier, since Andrew had mentioned they might not need Arya, Nathaniel had planned to follow him to check on Tom and make sure he was okay. They were discussing not alerting Miss Bella just yet about Tom's incident as they left the Home Office, with Ethan still sleeping on the couch. But as they reached the foyer, the elevator doors opened and Arya strode out, her eyes searching his, her brows furrowed in concern. "I'm sorry, Nathan, but what are you doing?" "You're not fully healed to be going off for hours," she scolded, her eyes gleaming with a hint of fear and worry. Nathaniel crossed the room to draw her into his arms for a brief moment before pulling back to meet her gaze. "I'm sorry, honey. Something terrible happened," Nathaniel said, and went on to tell her about Tom's kidnap. He was relieved that he was able to share the news in this way, rather than telling her they had lost Tom. Arya quickly headed back upstairs to change before joining them. Though she tried to mask her anger at Christine's betrayal, her clenched jaw and cold stare betrayed her feelings. "This is the 2nd time," she growled. "There won't be a 3rd, I promise you," Nathaniel declared. Now, they all waited for the doctors to work their magic and save the 2 men. The sound of approaching vehicles from outside the concierge medical unit drew their attention. Nathaniel, Alex, and Anne strode to the entrance to meet the men returning from the Powell operation. The jeep carrying Jake, Aidan, Anton, and Charles was the first to arrive, with Jake getting out ahead of the others. When Andrew noticed the bandages peeking out from under Charles's bloodied clothes, he let out a sigh. Charles met and held Andrew's gaze for what seemed like a minute, before nodding in acknowledgement and making his way inside. His head was a jumble of memories, and though his shoulder ached, the pain in his heart was far worse. He stood at the entrance of the privacy shield, where Theo was being treated. His eyes settled on Claire, and as if she could sense him, she looked in his direction. Her eyes widened with concern, and she hurried away from Theo's bed, rushing towards him. "I think I need a doctor," he quipped in a low, raspy voice. Claire gave him a searching gaze before hurriedly peeling off his jacket and bandages, revealing the stab wounds. With a worried look, she gently pulled him into a corner seat. Outside, the guards began to gather around Nathaniel. "Good job, guys," he called out loudly enough for everyone to hear. Pleasantries echoed in the air for about a minute as the group circled Nathaniel, Alex, and Andrew. "How is Mr. Hill?" Anton asked. "He's in surgery," Andrew replied. Anton nodded, excused himself, and hurried inside to find Dawn. "And Theo?" Aidan probed. Surgery, Andrew added. The other men nodded in acknowledgement. Jake stared longingly at the entrance of the concierge medical unit. He wanted to excuse himself, go and take a hot bath and join Evangeline, but he knew they couldn't retire just yet, not until Theodosius Duskmore was sorted out. "What's the plan for Theo?" Jake asked. A while later, after the doctors had finished attending to both Tom and Theo, Jake and Aidan stood guard near the opening of the privacy shield where Theo was being treated. As soon as Dr. Hawthorne handed over to the nurses and stepped back, Jake and Aidan positioned themselves at the shield's exit, waiting for her to leave. Once Dr. Hawthorne departed, leaving Dr. Yen behind, Aidan motioned to Ash, Adam and Will to join him. The four men stepped into the shielded area to join Jake. Dr. Yen, who was in the middle of giving instructions to a nurse, froze momentarily as the group of imposing men strode in. Her gaze darted nervously from one to the other. Sensing her unspoken question, Jake broke the silence. "I don't think post-surgery care will be necessary here, Dr. Yen," he said calmly but firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. Several hours later, Theo's eyelids fluttered open. He found himself in a hospital room with a nurse administering medication through his IV. Every part of his body felt numb, and he was groggy. Memories of that bastard Gaius shooting and stabbing him came rushing back. He recalled throwing himself into the fray to save Christine Powell from Gaius's onslaught of fury. Groaning, he thought grimly about how he'd make a game out of slashing Gaius into bits. That is, if Gaius had survived Charles's wrath. "What day is it?" he croaked, his voice hoarse. He needed to know how much time he'd lost. "Welcome back, sir," the nurse said, giving him a kind smile before answering his question. Theo cursed under his breath when he realized he'd lost 2 damn days. "Where am I? Who brought me here?" he demanded, agitation creeping into his tone. "You're at Evergreen Memorial Hospital. Mr. Darfield brought you here," the nurse replied. "Evergreen? Dr. Hawthorne's hospital?" he asked, his interest piqued. "Yes, sir," she confirmed. "Well, that's certainly reassuring," he quipped, darting his gaze around the room and taking note of its polished, well-furnished interior. The nurse chuckled lightly at his remark. Theo had more questions, but the news bulletin playing on the screen in the corner of the room caught his attention. The sound was low, but the scrolling headlines intrigued him. "Can you turn up the volume, please?" he asked. The nurse promptly adjusted it. The news was detailing the attack on the courthouse, the silent war that had unfolded at the Powell residence, and the staggering number of bodies found there, including the body of Old Man Powell. The report shifted to the arrest of Christine Powell. Theo didn't fail to notice that neither Tom's kidnap nor the Hawthorne's involvement was mentioned. He figured Miss Powell was in the fuck-around-and-find-out era. Darting a sharp gaze at the nurse, Theo asked, "Is there a way I can contact Mr. Darfield, please?" Hours earlier, shortly after Jake, Aidan, Ash, and Adam, under the supervision of Dr. Yen, successfully transferred Theo from the Hawthorne Estate Concierge Medical Unit to Evergreen Memorial Hospital, the men returned to the estate with the doctor. Upon arriving back at the medical unit, the place had grown quiet. Jake immediately knew the boss had returned to the house with Dr. Hawthorne. Jake and the others headed to check on Tom Hill and found Anton seated in a corner holding Dawn, who was asleep in his arms. Miss Bella was in a chair by the bedside, clutching Tom's hand. She, too, had fallen asleep, her head resting on a small space on the bed. Jake raised a hand in a quiet wave to Anton. Aidan, Will, and Ash mirrored the gesture. Anton acknowledged them with a subtle nod. The men stood silently for a moment, offering their unspoken support to Anton, before Jake gestured that they were leaving. Anton responded with another nod, a faint smile tugging at his lips. As the four men exited the unit, Aidan glanced at Jake and asked, "Need a ride back to the apartment?" "Yes, please," Jake replied. A short while later, Jake stood under a scalding hot shower, his eyes open, watching as blood washed off his body and spiraled down the drain. Determined to avoid dwelling on Christine's situation, he forced his thoughts elsewhere. Back to Charles. The memory came unbidden, vivid, and raw. It was the day Charles had approached him and Andrew, his face hard with anger, to tell them about Cass Monroe, Sergeant Cassandra Monroe, a dear friend to them all, but closest to Charles because they hailed from the same hometown. Charles had shared that Gaius Draven and 3 of his fellow Marines had assaulted Cass during a mission. Cass had refused to report it, convinced no one would believe her. It would be her word against 4 men. Charles had wanted to confront the perpetrators immediately, but Cass had begged him not to. Things had only worsened when the men began taunting and spreading rumors about her, implying she had loose morals and had willingly allowed their actions. Outraged, Charles had finally forced Cass to go to their superior officer to file a report, but the officer had brushed it off, advising her to let it go and promising he'd have a word with Gaius and his crew. Reluctantly, Cass had taken the senior officer's advice, though it left her frustrated and humiliated. The taunting didn't stop. It escalated, spilling over into public spaces. One night, the men openly mocked her at a local bar frequented by other Marines. That had been the breaking point. Charles had snapped, despite Cass's desperate attempts to hold him back. Jake and Andrew hadn't hesitated to join in. What followed was a full-blown altercation, a barroom brawl in the best traditions of Marine Corps camaraderie. Charles, Jake, and Andrew had laid into Gaius and his crew, delivering a beating that left no doubt about the consequences of their actions. After that confrontation, Gaius and his crew had left Cass alone, or so it seemed. Little did anyone know they had devised an even more despicable plan. One day, the 4-cornered Cass in the base latrine drugged her and allowed Gaius to assault her while they recorded it. The video, to an uninformed viewer, made it appear as though Cass was willingly engaging in sex with Gaius. Later, they showed her the footage and threatened to release it unless she agreed to let them continue taking turns assaulting her. Devastated and trapped, Cass wrote a letter to Charles, went to her rack, and retrieved her service pistol. She held the weapon to her head. Charles had burst into the barracks just as the shot rang out. His agonized screams still haunted Jake. Charles had wanted to kill the 4 men on the spot. Jake remembered that he'd felt the same burning rage, but they both knew it would have been too obvious if they had taken immediate action. Instead, they waited. Gaius and his men, knowing Charles, Jake, and Andrew were onto them, quickly fled the base, especially after hearing that Andrew had launched an official investigation and was demanding their court-martial. Jake and Aiden had tracked them down, working through official channels to apprehend them. They brought the 4 back to face justice. The men were dishonorably discharged, court-martialed, and sentenced to several years in prison. But it wasn't enough for Charles. He wanted them to die, like dogs. Jake and Andrew had managed to talk him out of taking matters into his own hands, reminding him that it would be too obvious who was responsible if he followed through with his plans. Still, Charles couldn't let it go. He visited the men in prison, standing face to face with them through the bars. He promised that if he ever saw them outside those walls, he would end their lives with his own hands. Gaius, trying to appear unshaken, was haughty, but Jake could see the fear in his eyes. Even so, Jake still thought Gaius got off too easy. If it were up to him, he would have made Gaius suffer. Not just for a few hours, but for days. He would have made sure the man begged for mercy before the end. The thought left him feeling cold inside, his heart frozen over with the intensity of his anger and the brutal darkness he knew he was capable of. Jake took a deep breath, exhaling slowly, his broad chest rising and falling in a steady, controlled rhythm. He hoped that Cass could finally rest now, and that Charles might find some measure of closure. After his shower, he threw on some clothes and headed back to the concierge medical unit. When he arrived, he made his way to Evangeline's privacy screen and found her sound asleep, with the nurse slumped in a chair in the corner, also dozing. Jake stepped quietly into the room, moving to the bedside. He stood there for a moment, gazing at Evangeline. Something shifted inside him. The sight of her and her swollen belly seemed to thaw the icy tar that had long encased his heart. Silently, he slipped off his boots and carefully made space for himself on the sturdy bed. Sliding in beside her, he gathered her into his arms, positioning her head to rest against his chest as he settled in. "My love," Evangeline murmured, her voice soft and full of warmth. She clung to him, nuzzling her face gently against his chest. Jake smiled down at her, his expression softening. He combed his fingers through her rich blonde hair, his touch tender as he stroked her scalp. Closing his eyes, he let out a deep, contented sigh and drifted off to sleep. Earlier on, Nathaniel, Arya, and Alex had returned to the house, with Alex parting from the couple in the foyer. Nathaniel took Arya's hand, his long, slender fingers intertwining with hers as he led her toward the elevator. Once inside, as the doors slid shut, he wrapped his arms around her, drawing her close against his body. "How are you feeling?" Arya asked, gently placing her palm against his chest. "Do you mean health-wise, or how I feel with you looking at me like that and your hand pressed to my heart?" he teased. Arya blinked, caught off guard by his response before bursting into a giggle. "Do you want me to hit you, Nathan?" she countered playfully. "You've got to stop asking me all these suggestive questions, my love," he shot back, feigning exasperation. Arya laughed again, tilting her head back so as to look into his eyes. "How is hitting you suggestive?" she probed with a smile. "Who knows? It might be my love language now," he replied with a mischievous grin. Arya's laughter grew, and she turned her face away, but he gently cupped her chin, making her revert her eyes to him. His gaze softened as he leaned closer, his lips brushing against hers. "I'm fine, baby," he murmured, his voice a deep, rasping whisper that sent a thrill through her. "And I can prove it to you here and now if you'd like." Arya understood too well what he meant. "We have to wait," she whispered in a voice that lacked conviction, her eyelids fluttering as his lips grazed hers, and his fingers started to skim her sides, gently stroking her, making her body kindle with fire for him. Nathaniel's intense gaze didn't waver. The elevator stopped, the doors sliding open, but they remained unaware. He eliminated the remaining space between their bodies, pressing her gently against the cold steel wall. His lips claimed hers, parting them with the prodding of his tongue sweeping into her mouth, stroking hers with slow but intense persistence. He explored her thoroughly, teasing her with the tip of his tongue. In one powerful sweep, he lifted her off her feet, holding her steady. They broke the kiss momentarily, their breaths ragged as they gazed at each other, longing etched in their expressions, their chests heaving in unison. "Take a shower with me," Nathaniel said, his tone low and commanding, leaving no room for argument. Arya's hand slid to his jaw, her fingers tangling in his hair as she kissed him deeply, scattering his dark curls. "Keep doing that and we won't even make it to the bathroom," Nathaniel growled, his voice husky with desire. Arya shivered in his arms, completely consumed by his intensity, unable to resist the magnetic pull between them. "Dr. Williams is going to have our hides. You're such a terrible, terrible influence on me, Nathaniel Hawthorne," Arya quipped, her voice low and breathless. "Tisk, tisk, tisk, Mrs. Hawthorne, yet you married me. What does that say about you, madam?" he teased, capturing her bottom lip between his teeth, making her shiver. "Nathan." Arya groaned softly, her voice laced with longing. "I've got you, baby," Nathaniel rasped, his voice thick with desire, every word a promise. A few hours later, Liam and Owen stirred awake at the sound of the door to the adjoining room opening. Since their mum had forbidden them from sleeping on the rug near Esme's bed, they'd trained themselves to wake up just before their big mama, Grandma Bella, and Aunt Anita arrived to help bathe Landon, Mason, and Esme, as well as assist the boys in getting ready for the day. Owen climbed out of bed and called, "Liam," as he trudged toward the adjoining room. "Coming," Liam mumbled, yawning as he followed. "Good morning, Big Mama, Grandma Bella, Aunt Anita," they greeted automatically, only to stop short when they saw it was their Aunt Mary and Aunt Tina, two of the household staff, accompanying their Big Mama instead of Grandma Bella and Aunt Anita. "Good morning to you, Owen, and to you too, Liam," Big Mama greeted them warmly, opening her arms for hugs. The boys rushed to her, wrapping their arms around her waist. She couldn't help but notice how tall they'd grown, now reaching her waistline. Her babies were growing up too fast. "What happened to Grandma Bella and Aunt Anita?" Owen asked, his curiosity piqued. "They're fine. Aunt Mary and Aunt Tina are just helping me today," Big Mama replied, with a gentle smile, brushing back Owen's hair. Liam eyed Mary and Tina skeptically, then glanced at Esme's cot. Folding his arms, he asked, "Do you have experience handling babies?" Mary tried not to laugh at the serious concern on Liam's face. "I have 2 girls your age. Does that help?" Aunt Tina offered with a kind smile. "How long ago was that?" Owen chimed in, crossing his arms. Mary couldn't hold back her laughter this time. The boys scowled at her, clearly unamused. Now, boys," Big Mama interjected, her tone firm but loving. Be nice. They're just here to help bathe the babies, that's all. Your mum will join us soon, she reassured them. Well, can we monitor them? Liam shot back, clearly uneasy about the idea of kitchen staff handling the babies. He'd seen them drop dishes and trays too many times. What if they dropped his baby brothers or sister? You really have to be very careful carrying the babies, Owen instructed, his tone serious. You've got to support their heads, real carefully. Of course, Master Owen, Aunt Mary replied, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Why don't you help me with Mason? And Master Liam can assist Aunt Tina with Landon, she suggested. The boys exchanged a look, silently weighing their options, then nodded in agreement. If they had to allow it, at least they'd supervise. They kept a watchful eye on the women as they cared for their younger siblings, refusing to let them out of their sight until their mum walked through the door. The moment Arya entered, Liam collapsed dramatically onto the floor. How long must I endure this stress? He lamented, making Arya chuckle. Owen was the first to rush to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. She hugged him to her side and walked over to where Liam lay sprawled on the floor. Come on, let's get up from the cold floor, my little old soul, she teased, attempting to lift him. But Liam broke into giggles, and Arya quickly realized she could no longer pick him up. The realization tugged at her emotions as she held both boys close, the weight of how fast they were growing sinking in. They had clearly inherited their dad's towering height. She pressed a kiss to each of their heads and said softly, All right, go get ready. Fang! Yes, Mama, they chirped in unison before darting off. When Arya noticed Tina and Mary chuckling, she asked, What did the boys do? The women exchanged amused glances before recounting how the two had kept them on their toes all morning. I think Owen was this close to smacking my hand, Tina quipped, holding her thumb and forefinger just a sliver apart. The room erupted into laughter, Arya shaking her head fondly at her mischievous boys. Much later, after the boys had finished bathing, brushing their teeth, and dressing for the day, they noticed their mom was still feeding their younger siblings. Deciding to check on their Uncle Jake's baby, they slipped out of the suite and hurried to the elevator. Descending 3 floors, they ran down the hallway to the nursery. However, when they reached the room, the door was closed. Exchanging puzzled glances, they turned the knob and peered inside. The room was empty. The biosync womb incubator was gone, and Dr. Hart was nowhere to be seen, though her belongings were still in the room. A profound fear gripped them both. Letting out loud, panicked screams, they bolted from the room and dashed back to the elevator, frantically pressing the button to return to the suite upstairs. When the elevator doors opened, they raced out and headed straight for their dad's makeshift theater room, only to run directly into their Uncle Stephen. Now, boys, where's the fire? Stephen asked, stopping them. The two looked up at him with wide, tearful eyes and cried, Someone stole our baby and Dr. Hart. Stephen's brows furrowed deeply. Someone did what now? He repeated, his tone sharpening with concern. My tube boy and Dr. Hart are missing, Liam wailed in terror. Tube! Stephen began, his voice trailing off as realization struck him. Oh boy, he muttered with dismay. Now how was he going to explain the turn of events to the boys? Stephen thought, a mild sense of panic creeping in. Stephen, deciding it was best to calm the boys first, crouched to their height and said, Listen, Dr. Hart is fine, and so is your Uncle Jake's baby, he assured them. So where are they? Liam demanded, his voice tinged with concern. They're at the concierge medical unit along with your Uncle Jake, Stephen replied, a plan forming in his mind. Why don't I quickly drive you there and bring you back before your mum and dad notice you're gone? He suggested. The boys exchanged glances and then nodded in unison. Stephen helped wipe their tear-streaked faces, took each of their hands, and led them toward the elevator. But why did they take Uncle Jake's baby back to the medical unit when Dad says it isn't safe? Owen questioned, his tone laced with concern. What if something happens to him there? Liam interjected, his worry obvious. The two bombarded Stephen with questions, their voices overlapping in their eagerness for answers. Stephen, however, figured Dr. Hart would be better equipped to explain the situation than he would. Blurting out the truth, that Uncle Jake's baby was now inside Dr. Hart's stomach, was definitely not an option. He couldn't help but smile to himself at the thought. Don't worry, they're fine. You'll see them for yourselves soon, Stephen reassured, keeping his tone calm. Soon enough, they arrived at the concierge medical unit. As they got down from the car, the twins spotted Tristan, who had just returned from a walk with his dad. "Tristan!" Owen and Liam called out, waving in his direction. "Good morning, Mr. Graham," they added in unison, their voices loud and cheerful. "Good morning, Liam, and to you too, Owen," Justin greeted, smiling warmly as Tristan waved back at the twins. "Where did you go?" Liam asked, directing the question to Tristan. "We went for a walk in the woods. Dad said I need fresh air, but it's really cold," Tristan replied simply. "Want to join us? We're looking for our missing baby and Dr. Hart," Liam offered eagerly. Stephen caught Justin's concerned frown and quickly interjected, laughing awkwardly. "No baby is missing. These two are just little jokers," he explained. Justin hesitated, but then slowly nodded. "Nuh-uh," Liam countered with a scowl. "They are both here and not missing, I promise," Stephen replied reassuringly. "Dad, can I go with them?" Tristan asked, turning to his father. "Sure, why not?" Justin replied, letting go of Tristan's hand. The boy hurried to join the twins, and together they entered the concierge medical unit. Stephen led the three children toward the privacy shield, where Dr. Hart was with Jake. As they reached the entrance, Liam and Owen saw Dr. Hart in a hospital robe, with their Uncle Jake holding her hand as she took tentative steps to move around. The twins exchanged a puzzled look before turning their attention back to Uncle Jake and Dr. Hart, their gazes filled with curiosity and concern. "Where's the baby?" Tristan asked, breaking the silence and drawing the adults' attention. Jake glanced at the children and immediately noticed Liam and Owen's pensive stares. Letting out a soft groan, he muttered under his breath, "Oh boy." Then, addressing the twins, he said, "Hello there, boys." Turning to Stephen, he added, "Sup, man?" Stephen gave Jake a pointed look, while Evangeline beamed at the boys, waving to them as she slowly returned to the bed. "I found the boys crying back at the house. They were worried their Uncle Jake's baby and Dr. Hart had been taken," Stephen explained with a hint of amusement. Jake chuckled. "Oh, come here, boys," Evangeline cooed, gesturing for the three of them to come closer. Owen and Liam exchanged glances before taking tentative steps forward. Both boys knew what it looked like for a woman to be pregnant. They'd just watched their mum go through it when she gave birth to their younger siblings. However, they were certain Dr. Hart hadn't been pregnant during her entire time at the estate. Yet now her stomach appeared noticeably swollen. Owen, trying to make sense of it, briefly considered the impossible. Had she somehow swallowed their Uncle Jake's baby whole? Of course, he knew that wasn't realistic, but the idea flitted through his mind because the BioSync womb incubator was missing, and Dr. Hart, who wasn't pregnant before, suddenly seemed to be. Still, he reasoned that if Uncle Jake wasn't panicking, then his baby must be safe. Right? "Come on, boys, don't be scared. We can totally explain," Jake said with a reassuring smile. "Uh-huh," Liam replied skeptically. An idea had begun to form in his mind, and he had come to the conclusion that Dr. Hart must have swallowed his tube boy. He didn't care if it didn't make sense. All he knew was that she wasn't pregnant before, and now she was, and Uncle Jake seemed completely fine with it, smiling and acting like everything was normal. He narrowed his eyes at the older man. While Liam wished he could trust his Uncle Jake's actions, he knew the man had terrible judgment when it came to beautiful women. After all, the man had married Christine Powell. A child kidnapper. Sure, Miss Powell hadn't actually kidnapped anyone that he knew of, but it made Liam feel better to think of her that way. Now, while Liam liked Dr. Hart, he didn't like how quickly Uncle Jake was getting chummy with her. In his opinion, they should wait at least 5 years to truly get to know her. The whole setup felt off to him, and his discomfort was clear as he darted his narrowed eyes from Dr. Hart to his Uncle Jake. Jake knelt down to the boys' level, meeting their gazes with a warm, reassuring look. Knowing how protective Owen and Liam were of him, he realized he couldn't leave the explanation to Evangeline. This was something he had to do himself. "All right, guys," Jake began, his tone low and mellowed. "I know this might sound a little strange at first, but let me explain. You know how your mum, dad, and everyone else always want to make sure the baby is as safe and healthy as possible, right?" Owen and Liam nodded, their eyes filled with curiosity. Even Tristan nodded, though the furrow in his brow suggested he had no idea what Jake was talking about. Well, Jake continued with a faint smile, your mom and dad, along with Dr. Hart, found a way to make sure your little cousin can grow strong and healthy by moving him to a very safe place. His voice trailed off as he glanced at Evangeline. Inside me, Dr. Hart finished with a warm smile. She placed a gentle hand on her stomach, smiling as she added, my tummy is now a special place where he can grow, just like he would if I were his mommy. Tristan's eyes widened in surprise. How did you do that? Did you swallow the baby? He asked, his voice tinged with alarm. She didn't swallow the baby, Tristan, Owen interjected, rolling his eyes in exasperation. Well, it's not entirely impossible, Liam chimed in, mild panic. Jake fought to keep a straight face, though his lips twitched with amusement. I promise you she didn't swallow the baby, he said firmly. Evangeline stifled a giggle behind him. Your mum, along with Aunt Anita, helped put the baby into her tummy, Jake explained, glancing at Liam and Owen. Cross my heart, he added, raising a hand solemnly when Liam arched a skeptical brow. I can show you the incision, Evangeline offered lightly, earning wide-eyed stares from Liam and Owen. So, Liam and Owen's mum put the baby in your tummy? Tristan asked, his tone filled with wonder. When Evangeline nodded, he grinned. Cool, he exclaimed, clearly impressed. After a brief pause, he added, she removed my tumor, too. I'm fine now. But my parents are getting divorced, he finished matter-of-factly, the last revelation casting an awkward silence over the group as his brightened face grew downcast. I'm sorry to hear that, Tristan, Dr. Hart said softly, sounding kind and empathetic. Liam and Owen, however, frowned at her, their expressions clearly saying, no, we're not. Dr. Hart continued gently. You should know, though, those are grown-up problems. It doesn't mean your parents don't love you just the same. Tristan nodded slowly, though he didn't seem entirely convinced. Yeah, that's what my dad said. Thanks, Dr. Hart. Liam and Owen exchanged uncomfortable glances. After a moment of silence, Owen cleared his throat. So, you are going to show us your incision? He asked, shifting the conversation back to the original route. Evangeline chuckled, shaking her head. All right, come closer, Evangeline urged, and the three boys hurried eagerly towards the bed. Jake lifted Liam and Owen while Stephen carried Tristan, making sure all three could see. Once they were settled, Evangeline carefully adjusted her gown, covering herself before exposing her stomach, revealing the bandaged lower part. Wow, the three boys whispered in unison, their eyes wide with amazement. So you're carrying him now, like how Mom carried Landon, Mason and Esme? Owen asked, his curiosity piqued. Yes, Evangeline replied with a warm smile, her gaze shifting fondly from one boy to the next. It's like a temporary home for him. This way we can make sure he's getting everything he needs to grow big and strong, and I promise I'll take extra good care of him. Jake held Liam and Owen securely and whispered to them, We're really lucky Dr. Hart is helping us. It's all to make sure the baby stays safe and healthy. Owen leaned closer, whispering back, We have to keep an eye on her though, so she doesn't run away with our baby. Jake couldn't help but chuckle. Do you boys really think she'd do that? He asked, amusement dancing in his eyes. Both boys pondered the question seriously before shaking their heads. I think she's okay, Liam said softly, though there was a hint of sadness in his tone, as if realizing he wouldn't get to see the baby again for a while. Jake pulled the two of them into a comforting hug. It's going to be fine, okay? He assured them gently. You cannot make her your girlfriend just yet, though, Uncle Jake, Liam said firmly, his small brow furrowed in a serious expression. Why not? Jake asked, genuinely curious. Because you might do something to upset her, Liam explained, crossing his arms. Then she'll go away with our baby, like the child kidnapper. The child kidnapper, Jake repeated, even though he already had a good idea who Liam was referring to. Miss Powell, Liam whispered conspiratorially, leaning in as if sharing a grave secret. That makes perfect sense, Jake replied, with a completely straight face, doing his best to hide his amusement. Now that you've seen Dr. Hart and your Uncle Jake's baby are fine, Shall we head back to the house? Stephen asked with a playful smile. The boys nodded enthusiastically, waving goodbye to Dr. Hart as their Uncle Jake carried them outside. As they stepped out, the sound of their Grandma Bella's voice drifted from behind another privacy shield. "Oh, so this is where Grandma Bella is. Can we go say hi?" Liam asked eagerly. Stephen exchanged a glance with Jake. They both knew Tom Hill was in rough shape, and if the children saw him, it would upset them. "Why don't I get her to come outside with your Aunt Dawn?" "There might be some things out there that kids aren't supposed to see," Stephen suggested. "Aunt Dawn is here too?" Liam asked, his face lighting up with a smile. "Oh yeah, she is," Stephen replied. Then, realizing he couldn't carry Tristan all the way there, he added, "Why don't you say goodbye to the twins for now, Tristan, while I take you back to your dad?" Tristan nodded in response, though his face fell, crestfallen. "We'll come back after breakfast, promise," Liam said, noticing Tristan's sadness. "We'll bring out our pet robot for us to play with, okay?" Owen added, trying to cheer him up. "Pet robot?" Tristan repeated, his expression brightening. The twins nodded enthusiastically. "Cool," Tristan said, a small smile returning to his face. "All right, that's settled. Say bye for now," Stephen directed. Tristan did as he was told, and Stephen carried him away. Jake began moving farther from the privacy shield where Tom Hill was admitted, heading toward the exit of the unit. He wanted to ensure the children wouldn't hear Tom's voice if he happened to speak. "Uncle Jake, we have to wait," Liam said, framing Jake's face in his small hands. "I know that, Liam. I just thought a little exercise wouldn't hurt anyone," Jake quipped, making the twins giggle as he squatted down with them clinging to his arms before standing up again. Meanwhile, Stephen hurried back to the privacy shield, where Tom Hill was with Dawn, Miss Bella, and Anton. "Good morning," Stephen greeted, drawing everyone's attention, including Tom, who was lying on the bed. Tom looked like he had been through a wrestling match with a bear and a car accident at the same time. His usual well-groomed appearance was nowhere to be found. His face was marred with bruises in various shades of blue, purple, and black. His swollen eyes and the cuts on his pale lips made it clear that the twins would have burst into tears if they had seen him in this state. "Liam and Owen came over to see Dr. Hart and heard your voice, Miss Bella. They wanted to come in here, but I didn't think it was a good idea for them to see their Grandpa Hill in his condition," Stephen explained. Tom nodded in understanding as Dawn, Miss Bella, and Anton stood up. "Thank you, Stephen," Dawn said sincerely. "While I'd love to see them, I don't think I want to make them cry or worry," Tom rasped, his voice strained. "Don't worry, dear. We'll go see them," Miss Bella assured him with a warm smile. "I'll come with you," Dawn added. Stephen nodded and gave Anton a curt nod of acknowledgement before retreating from the room. As he walked toward the unit's exit, Stephen spotted Jake squatting and holding the boys in his arms, making them laugh. Stephen chuckled to himself, recognizing Jake's distraction tactic. "Hello there, my lovelies." Miss Bella's cheerful voice rang out. Owen and Liam turned, their faces lighting up. "Grandma Bella!" They shouted in unison, their voices filled with joy. Jake put them down and they ran to the older woman, who wrapped them both in a warm hug, pressing kisses to the tops of their heads. "What are you doing here?" Dawn asked with a knowing smile. "Uncle Jake let Dr. Hart put our baby in her stomach," Liam announced, his face a mix of excitement, horror, and disgust. "Like a kangaroo," Owen added, scrunching up his face in disgust. Dawn giggled. Miss Bella laughed heartily, and even Anton let out a chuckle. Now, in my defense, I was told it's for his good," Jake quipped, raising his hands in mock surrender. "I think this version is way better than them thinking Dr. Hart swallowed the baby," Stephen added, making everyone laugh. Liam and Owen, however, didn't find it funny. "It's not like it's impossible," Liam grumbled in protest. "She could just go—" Owen mimicked a loud gulping sound, pretending to swallow something whole. Jake threw his head back, laughing loudly. "No, I don't think so," Dawn said, still laughing. "Fine," Liam muttered, scowling. Miss Bella pulled him closer, pressing a kiss on his forehead. "Ignore them. I also believe it's absolutely possible," she said in solidarity, winking at him. Owen looked up at her and then at his Aunt Dawn, intending to give her a smug smile. but his expression changed when he noticed a cut on her lip and a scratch on her left cheekbone. He also saw that she looked tired, her eyes bloodshot as if she'd been crying. "Are you okay, Aunt Dawn?" Owen asked, his question catching her off guard and drawing everyone's attention to her. Dawn smiled warmly at him and nodded. "I'm fine, dearie, thank you," she replied softly. "What happened to you, though?" Liam asked, his curious eyes narrowing. "Did you get into a fight, Aunt Dawn?" he added, scrutinizing her closely. "Ah, ha, ha. What makes you think I got into a fight?" Dawn replied with a forced laugh, trying to play it off. The two boys stared at her silently, their expressions serious despite her attempt to deflect. Anton looked away, chuckling to himself. "We're going to find out," Owen said in a low, determined tone. "So you better come clean," Liam added, crossing his arms over his chest in a no-nonsense manner. "I didn't get into a fight, boys, trust me," Dawn insisted. "I just, had an incident with a bad cat," she said, glancing toward the others for help. The men all avoided her gaze, clearly holding back their laughter. Then Dawn smacked Anton lightly on the chest, snapping him to attention. "Yeah, big mean cat," Anton confirmed, nodding seriously. "Are you buying this, Owen?" Liam whispered, leaning toward his twin. "Not one bit," Owen replied, shaking his head. The twins exchanged a knowing look before gesturing dramatically with their hands, pointing at their eyes and back at Dawn in the classic "I'm watching you" move. Dawn burst out laughing, her mum joining in with equal amusement. "Oh, you fierce protectors. Love you both so much," their Grandma Bella cooed, pulling the boys closer. "She's lying, Grandma Bella," Liam whispered conspiratorially into the older woman's ear. "I know," Miss Bella whispered back with a sly smile. "Mom?" Dawn exclaimed, feigning indignation, which only made everyone laugh harder. Between Stephen, Jake, Anton, Dawn, and Miss Bella, they managed to usher the boys back into the Jeep with Stephen. "We'll be back, Uncle Jake," Owen announced, as Jake helped him and Liam into the vehicle. "We have to keep an eye on Dr. Hart," Liam added with a serious nod. "Don't you worry, I've got it," Uncle Jake reassured them with a grin. As the Jeep drove off, Anton came to stand beside Jake, watching as Dawn and Miss Bella headed back inside. "Did Dawn get into a fight, though?" Jake asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yep, I think she kicked Christine's ass," Anton quipped with a smirk. Jake chuckled. "I think Liam would be quite pleased to hear that story," he replied, making Anton laugh. Returning to the house, Owen and Liam thanked their Uncle Stephen before dashing back to their mom's suite to check if she was done with their younger siblings. Upon entering the living room, they noticed their mom wasn't alone. Their dad was there too, along with Uncle Alex, Aunt Anna, Uncle Ethan, Aunt Anita, Uncle Andrew, and Uncle Ethan's girlfriend, Aunt Isla. Their mom was examining Isla's eyes in a corner. "Where are you boys coming from?" Nathaniel asked, as the boys rushed in, greeting everyone. Each of the adults returned their greetings, including Aunt Isla. The poor thing was blind, and their mom had told them not to bring it up. The boys hurried to their dad's side, where he was seated on a single-seater couch. They climbed onto his lap, each perched on an armrest, and cupped their hands against his ears. "We went to check on Uncle Jake's baby. Turns out he's inside Dr. Hart's tummy now," Liam whispered. "Tristan and Liam thought she swallowed the baby," Owen added with a giggle. Nathaniel chuckled, especially when Liam scowled at his brother and whispered, "Nah, we all thought it." Owen shook his head in negation. "I knew better," he whispered smugly. Liam rolled his eyes. "Dad, Tristan's mum and dad are getting divorced," he added. Nathaniel drew back to hold their gazes. Both boys nodded solemnly in confirmation. "That's sad, I guess," Nathaniel whispered back, playing along. "Is it though, Dad? Is it?" Liam asked skeptically, lifting an eyebrow. "Tristan's dad sure doesn't look sad about it," Owen added. "Well, that might be because adults try not to show negative emotions around kids," Nathaniel explained. Liam said with a thoughtful nod. "Even if she's not a good person. You know, like Miss Powell," Liam frowned. "Even so, no one likes to make mistakes or fail at something," Nathaniel replied. "What are you three whispering about?" Ethan asked, amused. "Stuff," Liam replied with a grin, wrapping one arm around his dad's neck. Nathaniel chuckled and pressed a kiss on his cheek. "So you two are little gossips now?" their mom teased. "No, we aren't," Owen replied with an indignant frown, while Liam quickly whispered into their dad's ear. "Dad, did you know Aunt Dawn got into a fight? And now she's lying, saying she fought a cat." He then drew back to give his dad a knowing look as he nodded solemnly. "A cat?" Nathaniel repeated, trying not to laugh. "Ridiculous, right? Someone should investigate," Liam suggested smugly. Nathaniel burst out laughing. "You smart little genius," he teased, making Liam laugh as he tickled his ribs. "Dad, stop!" Liam exclaimed, laughing. "Why don't you share the gossip so we can all laugh?" Aunt Anita teased. Owen opened his mouth to speak, but Liam quickly clamped his hand over it, glaring at him. Turning to Aunt Anita with a smug smile, Liam said, "Sorry, Aunt Anita, boys only." Nathaniel roared with laughter as Anita gasped and got up to chase after Liam. Laughter echoed through the room as Liam clung to his dad for protection. The group spent the morning together, lingering in the expansive room long after breakfast. Their voices blended harmoniously with the soft crackle of the fire as they moved seamlessly from one topic to the next. Isla enjoyed spending time with her boss's family, and having Dr. Hawthorne personally attend to her felt like a privilege. She also cherished the unexpected bond she had formed with Ethan. What she thought would be a fleeting connection had deepened into something far more meaningful. Yet despite the joy of falling asleep in Ethan Blackwood's arms, feeling the tenderness of his lovemaking, and waking up to the same ardent passion day after day, fear gnawed at her. She worried that the novelty of their relationship would wear off and that Ethan would eventually see her blindness as a burden. Although her vision was improving just as Dr. Hawthorne had assured her, but not as quickly as she had hoped, the slow progress only fueled her anxiety, causing spikes in her blood pressure, something her checkups couldn't hide, adding to her embarrassment. "You need to relax, Isla, and let things happen naturally," Dr. Hawthorne often reminded her. All Isla could do was nod, even as her fears continued to mount. Anita's diligence in managing her medication, as well as Ethan's, helped ease some of her stress. And being surrounded by the family brought moments of levity, especially with the twins' playful mischief. Their antics always had everyone laughing. Ethan's warmth towards the twins didn't escape Isla's notice, and the affection in his voice when he spoke to them stirred thoughts of him as a father. It only heightened her anxiety, making her painfully aware that whatever they had together might not last. Later, as the group began to disperse, Ethan entwined his fingers with hers, a familiar, comforting gesture of his, as they excused themselves for the evening. "Thanks, boss, for having me here," Isla said softly in Nathaniel's direction. Nathaniel Hawthorne scoffed from across the room. "Stop thanking me, Isla. You're a guest here," he said in his deep, matter-of-fact tone. Ethan's fingers tightened gently against hers as his thumb traced soothing patterns over her skin. He then led her back to their room in silence. The air between them felt heavier with each step. Once inside, Ethan closed the door behind them. The tension between him and Isla seemed to grow as he guided her to sit on the edge of the bed before sitting beside her. Holding her hand firmly, he hesitated for a moment, and Isla's heart began to race. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and tinged with regret. "We need to talk, Isla." Her chest tightened and panic surged through her. There was a faint withdrawal in his tone that made her stomach knot. Bracing herself, Isla felt her worst fear creeping in. Was this the moment he'd decide she wasn't worth the effort? Was he already giving up on her? The thought sent a wave of pain through her that she struggled to contain. Tears pricked the back of her eyes. Ethan wasn't quite sure how to begin explaining to Isla about the Blackwoods and his connection to them. The same connection that had ultimately led to the accident that left her in her current condition. Things with Isla had progressed faster than they usually did with other women, but it felt different with her. Even so, despite the growing connection they shared, both physically and emotionally, he wasn't sure he was ready to expose himself that deeply to her. The hesitation wasn't something he wanted to examine too closely. Not yet. And the thought of bringing up Ian Blackwood or his mother was even less appealing. He didn't want to talk about Diana Blackwood or her sons. He didn't want to open up that side of himself to someone he had just met, no matter how much he felt drawn to her. Yet this woman, this chick, as he sometimes called her, had stood by him when he was at his lowest. She had fought for him when his mother's memory and dignity were disrespected at the wake, and now she was tangled in the Blackwoods mess to the point where it had cost her sight, even if only temporarily. He felt like he owed it to her, to let her in, to share the weight of his thoughts and emotions. She deserved that much. Ethan knew he needed to tell her before he left New York to confront his past. Ethan interlaced his fingers with hers, gently stroking the back of her hand as he began. Something came up, Isla. I'm supposed to go back to Sylvan Ridge to sort out some family matters. He paused, his eyes flicking to her face. His heart softened as he took in her beauty, a pang of longing slipping through him. I miss seeing your eyes, Isla, he blurted unexpectedly. The words hung between them for a moment, and his lips curled into a smile when he saw hers do the same. So this isn't a breakup, she quipped, her tone light but curious. Ethan's brows furrowed as he blinked, his gaze sharpening. He studied her face as though seeing her for the first time. Whoa, a breakup? Are you tired of me already, ma'am? He teased, though her words struck him harder than he'd expected. You know, being with a chick without her sight might be dragging Ethan Blackwood's game down, she retorted with a smirk. Okay, I'm going to need you to stop hanging out with me, Nate, Alex, and Anna because... What? Never say that again, Isla. He chided with exaggerated dismay, drawing a giggle from her. What makes you think I'm secretly not into this arrangement? Ethan countered playfully. Ah, so that's the plan. To keep me grounded and by your side, huh? Isla replied with mock indignation. Can you blame me, woman? Have you seen yourself in the mirror? Ethan shot back, leaning over to press a kiss to the corner of her mouth. But she tilted her face toward him at the last moment, and their lips met. Ethan groaned, releasing her hand to cup her jaw as he deepened the kiss. Damn it, Isla. We were supposed to be having a serious conversation, he murmured against her lips, his voice a mix of frustration and desire. Isla managed in response, too caught up in the drugging kiss to form coherent words. Relief flooded her. He wasn't breaking up with her. Damn this cast, Ethan grumbled, breaking the kiss for a moment. Isla giggled, her laughter light and full of warmth. When he paused from kissing her, resting his forehead against hers, he said, I need to tell you something, Isla. I don't want to leave you behind. I want you with me, but the trip to Sylvan Ridge is going to be dangerous, far more than it already has been, baby. Isla tensed, her heart racing at the forbidden undertone in his voice. What's going on, Ethan? She asked, her concern evident. Our accident wasn't an accident, baby, he blurted out, pulling back from her. It was perpetrated by... He paused, his brows furrowing. The man's name is Benedict Blackwood. He's the eldest, not biological, son of Ian Blackwood. Ethan hesitated, his voice tightening. Ian Blackwood. His words trailed off, then he continued, his voice now a low growl. Ian Blackwood willed his entire fortune to me, leaving Benedict and his 3 other brothers, whom you met at my mother's wake in Sylvan Ridge, completely cut out. To my knowledge, he didn't leave his wife Diana Blackwood a dime either. So they came after us? Isla asked, her voice edged with anger. The hard edge in her tone, coupled with her use of us, made Ethan stop pacing and turn toward her, his heart constricted. Yes, baby, that's what made them come after us, he admitted in a slow, measured drawl. Damn these eyes, Isla said bitterly, her anger flaring. Ethan felt his heart twist at her reaction, a deep ache settling within him. You know, normally you're supposed to be outraged that being with me put you in harm's way, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. Then you're supposed to be pretty mad at me and get the hell out of my life. I am mad at you, Ethan. Oh, I'm very mad, Isla retorted, standing abruptly from the bed. Her scowl deepened, her fists clenched tightly at her sides. How long have you known and kept it to yourself? The day Tom was taken, Ethan admitted. Nathaniel and Alex decided I needed to know what Ian did and the domino effect it caused. He sighed, his voice tinged with regret. I think they wanted to give us room to heal a little, he added quietly, almost as if speaking to himself. You just found out then? Isla asked, her tone softer, her posture gradually relaxing. Yes, Ethan replied. I'm sorry, babe. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't be in this state. Isla, though taken aback by the revelation, quickly processed the implications. If Ethan had known from the beginning and kept her close, she would have assumed he was doing it out of guilt. But now, knowing he had just learned the truth himself, it didn't feel that way. His remorse felt genuine, unclouded by ulterior motives. "Who is Ian Blackwood to you, Ethan?" Isla asked, her voice low and filled with concern. Ethan started, then paused, struggling with the words before he finally said through gritted teeth, "My biological father." "What did he do, darling?" Isla asked gently, extending her hand toward him, silently urging him to come closer. Ethan hesitated. He preferred not to let her make him feel more vulnerable than he already did, but he didn't want her to feel rejected either. With a sigh, he moved closer, allowing her to draw him into a hug. He buried his face in the curve of her neck, holding her tightly against him. "He abandoned us and made sure our lives were a living hell," Ethan said with a weary sigh. Isla tightened her hold on him, offering silent comfort. They stayed like that for a moment, clinging to each other before Isla pulled back slightly. She tilted her face up and opened her eyes, as if searching for his. Ethan cupped her jaw with his good hand and slowly lowered his face, capturing her lips in a gentle, searing kiss. He was grateful for the distraction she was giving him. "Take me with you," she whispered against his lips. "It would be dangerous, Isla. I don't want them targeting you," Ethan replied in a raspy whisper, brushing his lips against hers in soft, feathery kisses. "So you think I'd be safer here in New York, back at my apartment?" she challenged, her tone laced with defiance. "Who said anything about you returning to your apartment?" Ethan countered and silenced her with another kiss, his lips firm yet tender against hers. The following day, Jake was escorting Evangeline out of the concierge medical unit when his phone vibrated in the pocket of his winter jacket. Evangeline's intake of breath upon seeing the winter wonderland outside distracted him, making him shift his focus to her. He watched as a smile spread across her lips in delight. His eyes dropped to the swell of her stomach, which she instinctively cradled protectively, and his heart tightened with emotion for her. "I hope you don't mind spending the coming holidays heavily pregnant," he said, his gaze searching as she turned her beautiful eyes toward him. "You mean, do I mind lazing around during the festive season with you feeling guilty enough to do all of my chores for me?" she quipped. Jake roared with laughter. "Just so you know, I plan to keep this up for the next 3 years, she teased. But the laughter in Jake's eyes faded, replaced by a profound emotion Evangeline couldn't quite describe. "I'd love that baby as long as you don't mind," he rasped, stepping closer to cup her jaw, his thumb brushing her skin as he gazed at her lovingly. "With how much we spend together, you'll be lucky if we stop after 3 years, she quipped, smiling up at him. "We have a big house, Eva. I'm not scared of a big family," Jake replied, making her giggle. "So your apartment is your idea of a big house, huh?" Evangeline teased. Jake blinked, realizing he hadn't told her about his house, the one sitting empty. "We have a big house, Evangeline. As a matter of fact, it's just next door to the Hawthorne estate. When Dr. Hawthorne says it's okay to let you out of here, or when she can trust me to take care of you, I'll take you there. We can spend a weekend there and see how we like it," he said. She frowned, giving him a searching gaze. "You have a house close by here and you stay here?" Evangeline asked with interest. Jake grinned. "I prefer a simple life, darling," he replied. Evangeline beamed at him. "Why do I feel like I just gave you the right answer?" "You have quite the responsive way of asking, my love," he added. Evangeline's face warmed at the endearment, and she looked away, smiling. Jake chuckled, cupping her jaw to press a kiss on the top of her nose. He then drew back, holding her gaze as his lips hovered above hers. He watched her part her lips in anticipation, her long lashes fluttering as her eyes gleamed with need. "I can't wait to have you all to myself again, Eva," he whispered before lowering his face to take her lips. They both heard someone clear their throat, and they looked over to find one of the nurses from Evergreen Memorial watching them. Evangeline giggled and Jake grumbled, "Okay, this woman needs to go back to the hospital. She's beginning to get on my nerves." But his phone rang again, and he pulled it out, seeing an unknown number. He held a finger up to Evangeline to excuse himself and said, "Give me a sec," before moving away to answer the call. "Darfield?" A familiar voice probed as soon as he answered. "Glad to see you made it, Theo," Jake said in a neutral tone. The other man chuckled. I heard I have you to thank for that, came his smug reply. We can't just let you die, Theo, Jake replied. I appreciate that, Theo responded. And I see Miss Powell is left to face the music. Alone, he added. Jake tensed. We rarely interfere in what doesn't concern us, Theo, Jake replied. I get that with the news coverage, Theo replied. Why are we discussing this, Theo, instead of your comfort? I assume that's what you typically call me for, Jake probed. I just needed to know if the boss would mind if I stepped in to help the lady is all, Theo replied. I can assure you, we have zero interest in the case. If you choose to help her, I figured it would be just. After all, you, your team, her grandfather and she included, contributed to her situation right now, Jake said. No need to point fingers, it's done now, no regrets, Theo quipped. Would that be all? Jake probed. Not at all. By any means. Do you know where Gaius Draven might be currently? Theo asked, his voice carrying a hardened edge. I believe he's with the police, Theo, Jake replied. Police? You let him get arrested? He'll just wiggle out of there in less than a day. Theo growled in anger. I seriously doubt he would be doing that, Theo. He, along with the rest of the men, every single one of them, will never be doing that, Jake replied. There was a pause on the other end before Theo said, Please tell me it's what I'm thinking. I'm pretty sure the reason it's not on the news is that it must be a gruesome sight, Jake said. Theo cheered loudly. Well, since that problem is out of the way, may I please order food that's 54th Avenue worthy? No shade on Dr. Hawthorne's hospital, but these folks are bent on starving me, he quipped. I suggest you listen to them, Theo. Dr. Hawthorne herself had to operate on you, and that usually means nearly fatal, Jake said. Damn it, Theo grumbled. Give it a few days, then you can get whatever gourmet you desire, Theo, Jake advised. Whatever, man, Theo replied. And Theo, Jake said, wanting to warn him about Christine's duplicity, but thinking better of it. Theo was just as dangerous, whatever his reason for wanting to help Christine. Jake was confident he could handle himself. Yes, Theo replied. Try and stay out of trouble, Jake said instead. Theo chuckled before ending the call. Nathaniel sat up in his bed, in the makeshift theatre room, as Arya and Dr. Williams got ready to check his vitals. Andrew walked in, greeting both Arya and Dr. Williams. How's Anita this morning? Arya asked. She's already excited for the bachelorette party, Andrew joked, making Arya, Nathaniel and Dr. Williams laugh. I think we have plans to take care of that in Sylvan Ridge, Nathaniel said with a mysterious tone, prompting Arya to give him a skeptical look. We've already planned it here, she countered. I'm sure we can have anything you need either flown to Sylvan Ridge or duplicated in Alaska, Nathaniel teased. Why do I feel like you're up to something? Arya asked, narrowing her eyes at him. Honey, I upgraded one of my jets to ensure a comfortable, baby-friendly environment. The cabin pressure now maintains an altitude of 2,000 to 4,000 feet for stability. It features top-tier HEPA air filtration, eliminating 99.9% of airborne particles. The climate control system keeps the cabin at a comfortable temperature of 72 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, with humidity levels between 40 and 50%. We've also added noise-dampening insulation to keep the cabin quiet, and there's a baby care cabin that includes a vibration-dampened bassinet with safety restraints, a changing station, bottle warmer, and sterilizer. For your comfort, my love, nearby seats have massage features, and the galley can prepare anything from snacks to full meals, Nathaniel stated, wanting her to understand just how prepared he was to accommodate almost anything as long as he got his way. And then he added, Oh, I'm definitely up to something. I'm going to be so bad that I'm willing to let Rowan tag along, Nathaniel replied. Williams and Andrew burst out laughing. Arya tried not to laugh, even as Nathaniel's innocent stare reminded her so much of Liam when he had mischief up his sleeve. The thought made her heart swell with love for him. She walked to the side of his bed and said in a soft, affectionate tone, Behave, Nathan. Nathaniel grinned, his expression unrepentant. Don't I always, my love? He replied smoothly, a mischievous gleam in his eyes. Arya narrowed her gaze at him. Still, a smile threatened to break through as she busied herself hooking him up to the monitors to check his heart condition. Dr. Williams entered, his tone light and playful. Let's see how our star patient is doing today. Nathaniel smirked. I feel terrific." Aria flicked her eyes up to meet his and held his gaze, a smile stretching across her lips. Nathaniel winked at her. She lowered her gaze, smiling, and didn't miss how he had discreetly pulled her closer, so she was standing between his legs, his left hand resting on her hip. Dr. Williams shook his head in amusement. "We're at the post-transplant critical window, Nathaniel. Let's confirm that terrific feeling with some hard data, shall we?" Aria chuckled, and Nathaniel mock glared at her. She was tempted to stick out her tongue at him, but refrained. She could feel Nathaniel's fingers stroking her side through the fabric of her dress. He was acting more and more like the playful Nathaniel she remembered before his cancer diagnosis, and she loved it. Still, she didn't want to encourage him to be overly confident about his health just yet. Dr. Williams was right. This was the post-transplant critical window, a time when patients are at the highest risk of complications. The recipient's immune system could recognize the transplanted organ as foreign and attempt to attack it, and the immunosuppressive drugs Nathaniel was receiving were essential to prevent organ rejection, but they also made him more susceptible to infections. Then there were concerns about improper healing of the incision site, blood clots, or internal bleeding. Thankfully, none of these were an issue with Nathaniel. His incision site was clean and well healed. The memory of her trailing kisses down the scar the night before in the shower replayed in her head, and her breathing grew shallow. Nathaniel locked his gaze with hers, and Aria felt her face heat up. Nathaniel grinned knowingly. She cleared her throat, putting space between their bodies as she finished setting up the machines. The sound of the heart monitor beeping steadily filled the room, a reassuring rhythm that eased the tension in Aria's shoulders. "Wounds healing beautifully," she murmured softly. Dr. Williams stepped closer to examine the sutures. "You did an excellent job with this." "It's remarkable," he said, nodding in approval. "Let's run a few tests to make sure everything internally is as perfect as it looks externally." Aria stepped aside as Dr. Williams prepared the echocardiogram. She folded her arms, her gaze fixed on Nathaniel. Despite his light-hearted demeanor, she noticed the faint tension in his jaw. He was masking his apprehension, and she knew better than to call him out on it. Instead, she stepped closer and rested her hand on his arm briefly, offering silent reassurance. When he looked at her, she smiled and gently stroked his arm. The playful spark in his eyes softened into something deeper. Dr. Williams cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "All right, let's take a look at this heart of yours." As the ultrasound wand moved over Nathaniel's chest, Aria and Dr. Williams watched the screen. The new heart was functioning beautifully, each beat strong and steady. "Excellent," Dr. Williams said after a few moments. "No abnormalities, no signs of rejection. Your heart is working perfectly, Nathaniel." Aria let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "See," she said, her lips curving into a smile. "Fantastic feelings backed by fantastic results." Nathaniel grinned again, this time with a touch of genuine relief. "I told you I was fine." Dr. Williams chuckled. "Fine indeed, but let's not get complacent. Keep following the regimen, take your medications, and don't overexert yourself." Nathaniel's grin widened. "Amen," he quipped. Aria shook her head, biting back a laugh as she began to unhook him from the machines. "Andrew?" Nathaniel called out as Aria worked to disconnect him from the machines. "Yes, boss," Andrew responded, standing up from the corner couch. "Can you bring in Dr. Sterling now?" "Thanks," Nathaniel instructed in a calm, authoritative tone. Aria paused her actions and glanced up at him. "Yes, boss," Andrew said before exiting the room. "What do we need Dr. Sterling for, my love? Aren't Dr. Williams and I enough?" Aria teased, a faint smile playing on her lips. Dr. Williams chuckled softly as he headed toward the adjoining room. "Dr. Sterling isn't coming for me, babe," Nathaniel said as he stood, retrieving his shirt to put it on. "She's coming to give you a checkup," he added, his expression now serious, all traces of playfulness gone. Aria arched an eyebrow at him. "Nathan, I'm fine. My incision has healed. I'd like that confirmed on paper, please," he replied, his gaze unwavering. Aria let out a long sigh, understanding his concern, though her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Before she could protest further, the door opened, and Dr. Sterling peeked in before stepping inside. Nathaniel reached for Aria's hand and guided her to perch on the edge of the bed. Dr. Sterling approached with a friendly smile. "Good morning, boss," she greeted Aria, then turned to Nathaniel. Good morning, Mr. Hawthorne? Still holding Nathaniel's gaze, Arya responded to the greeting, noticing the firm set of his jaw. With a resigned sigh, she settled back on the bed. Good morning, Dr. Sterling. Please conduct a thorough examination of my wife, including screening for any infections, Nathaniel said in a calm, authoritative tone. Very well, Dr. Sterling replied, a hint of amusement in her voice as she noticed the silent standoff between the couple. Is there any particular reason we're checking for infection? She asked curiously, already preparing her equipment. We've resumed bedroom duties, Nathaniel quipped without hesitation. Arya gasped, her cheeks blazing. Nathan, you weren't supposed to tell, she growled. We're married, honey. I'm sure Dr. Sterling understands, he replied smoothly, stepping back to avoid her swatting hand. He chuckled as her eyes darted around, searching for something to throw, but the only object within reach was a roll of tissue paper. Dr. Sterling quickly stifled a laugh and began setting up medical instruments, including a sterile speculum and swabs to perform the necessary tests. Watch your back, sir, Arya warned with a narrowed gaze. I love you too, baby, Nathaniel said with a grin, entirely unfazed. Dr. Sterling reached for a clean pair of gloves, slipping them on with practiced ease. Please lie back, Dr. Hawthorne, she said in a soft, gentle tone. Arya complied, her expression still a mix of embarrassment and reluctant acceptance. She leaned back onto the bed, adjusting her position as Nathaniel moved aside to give Dr. Sterling more space. I'll be taking some blood samples, Dr. Sterling explained, retrieving a tourniquet and alcohol swabs. She tied the tourniquet around Arya's arm and gently tapped the area to locate a vein. Satisfied, she swabbed the site with alcohol and inserted the needle to draw blood into a series of vials. Arya winced slightly but didn't complain, keeping her gaze away from Nathaniel, who was watching attentively. After labeling the vials, Dr. Sterling placed them into a small container. Now, let's perform a pelvic examination to check for any signs of infection, she said, maintaining a warm but professional tone. She adjusted the bed to a more comfortable angle for Arya, then retrieved a speculum from the tray. After applying lubricant, she held Arya's gaze and said, Ready? Arya nodded, then gripped the edge of the bed. Nathaniel stood nearby, his eyes flicking between Arya and Dr. Sterling, the piercing gems gleaming with a hawk-like intensity. Dr. Sterling inserted the speculum carefully and used a sterile swab to collect samples from the cervix and vaginal walls. My apologies for the discomfort, boss, she said with a smile. Arya chuckled as she inhaled deeply, her expression etched with determined poise as the procedure continued. Dr. Sterling placed each sample into labeled containers, ensuring everything was secure before removing the speculum. She then conducted a visual inspection, using a handheld light to check for any signs of redness, swelling, or irritation. Satisfied, she removed her gloves and disposed of the used materials in the medical waste bin. All done, Dr. Sterling said as she stepped back, finishing her task. I'll take these samples to the concierge for analysis. The results should be ready in a few hours, but I must say everything looks great, and you've stopped experiencing lochia. She smiled warmly. Arya sat up, adjusting her dress. Thank you, Claire, she said softly, avoiding looking in Nathaniel's direction. Nathaniel, however, caught every word, knowing the medical term lochia means bleeding. So then Arya was done with her postpartum bleeding. Thank you, Dr. Sterling, he said. The relief in his voice was unmistakable. Claire nodded. You're welcome. Let me know if you experience any discomfort or have questions in the meantime. She gathered her equipment and the taken samples, heading toward the door. Once the door closed behind her, Arya made to get off the bed, but Nathaniel, noting she was still ignoring him, moved quickly, stepping closer and gently trapping her in place at the edge of the bed, forcing her to look up into his eyes. His gaze locked onto hers, demanding her attention. I told you I was fine, she said, her tone firm yet vulnerable. Maybe so, he murmured, his voice low and soft, but I needed to be sure. It's a relief to know I'm not putting you at risk, babe. Her brow arched as she challenged him. So now you don't trust my judgment, she probed. Not what I said, Nathaniel replied, his lips twitching into a faint smirk. But I can tell you hate that Dr. Sterling knows we've already resumed our activities. His eyes darted in their sockets as he tried to figure out the reason. Surely she cannot be embarrassed about that. It's embarrassing, Nathan, Arya admitted, her voice tinged with frustration. I'm supposed to know better than to risk my own health. Nathaniel exhaled slowly, his tension easing, glad to hear that her concern was over her own choices. You're human, Arya, he said, his tone gentle. And so is your husband. He leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her lips. Arya's eyes briefly flicked shut before she peered into his hypnotizing grey eyes that she loved so much, the heat in his gaze making her breath catch. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and again, then again, each time more lingering, more intense, as if savoring each moment. His fingers sought hers, interlacing with them as he tightened his grip. Their breathing grew louder, mingling in the charged space between them. Nathan, she breathed, her voice trembling. He silenced her with another kiss, this one even more consuming, as he lifted her hands and gently pinned them above her head, guiding her back onto the bed. Nathan Williams, Arya managed to gasp in warning. Nathaniel immediately pulled back, crossing the room in quick strides. He locked the adjoining door before heading to the main door. Opening it, he spotted Aiden and Andrew outside. Nobody comes in here, he said firmly. Without waiting for a response, he shut the door and locked it. Andrew and Aiden exchanged a glance before chuckling and shaking their heads. Nathaniel returned to Arya, leaning over her as his hands cupped her hips. He captured her lips in a deep kiss, drawing a soft moan from her. God, you feel so good, he groaned against her mouth. Meanwhile, outside the door, Aiden glanced at Andrew and said, Those two make marriage look so beautiful. It is beautiful, Andrew replied with a knowing smile. Aiden nudged him playfully, causing the older man to chuckle. How's Noria? Andrew asked. She has her exam later today, Aiden said. I pray she aces it. Otherwise, the trip to Sylvan Ridge won't be much fun if she's feeling down. Ah, she's been studying so hard. She'll ace it, Andrew replied confidently. From your lips to God's ears, MacLeod, Aiden said with a small smile. Upstairs, Noria, along with Anna and Anita, worked with Miss Everly to get the triplets ready for the day. Liam and Owen stayed close, keeping an eye on things and helping wherever they could. While Noria dressed Esme, Owen moved to stand beside her. Aunt Noria gave him a warm smile, and he gently brushed the back of his fingers against his baby sister's soft cheek. Esme responded with a bright smile and clasped his finger tightly in her small hand. I think she knows her big brother is always watching over her, Aunt Noria teased. Owen's face lit up at her words. With a casual shrug, he said, Of course, it's my job to protect her and give her whatever she wants. Noria chuckled softly, continuing to dress Esme. Did you have a big brother, Aunt Noria? Liam asked as he joined them. Noria's smile faltered, and she glanced down as memories from her past surfaced, making her heart race. Noticing the boys' expectant faces, she forced a small smile, avoided their eyes, and answered, No, I wasn't that lucky. Liam and Owen exchanged curious glances. That's okay, Owen said reassuringly. Uncle Aiden isn't really our uncle, but we chose him to be. Yeah, even Uncle Andrew isn't our real uncle, Liam added. Really? I would have never guessed, Noria replied, playing along, hoping to shift the conversation away from her family. See, even you couldn't tell, Liam said triumphantly. So you could make our uncles your brothers. They'd love to protect you, just like they do us. Promise, Owen added. So don't be sad, okay, Aunt Noria, Liam chimed in. Noria nodded and gave them a genuine smile, though the type of affection she sought from their Uncle Aiden was far from brotherly. You two are the best, she said, ruffling their hair as they grinned back at her. Shortly after, her eyes unconsciously drifted to the clock. Owen, noticing, asked, Do you need to go somewhere, Aunt Noria? We can watch Esme for you. No, it's fine, she replied with a sheepish smile. I just have an exam later today and I'm a little nervous about missing it. An exam? Owen asked, his brows furrowing. I have a GED test scheduled for this evening, Noria explained. I'll be taking it online and honestly, I'm pretty nervous. Oh, I know what a GED test is, Owen said. I tried signing Liam and me up for one, but they told us we're too young. You don't have to worry, it's super easy, Liam chimed in confidently. There was a lady back in Sylvan Ridge who worked with my mom at the hospital, Liam began. She was a janitor there, Owen added. She wanted to take the exam, and Mum told us to help her study since we didn't have much else to do. Liam continued. She scored really high and kept working at the hospital while starting school, Owen finished. That's really inspiring. Thanks for sharing, boys, Noria said warmly. We can help you with some last-minute studying if you'd like, Owen offered. Liam frowned at Owen. For a price? He asked with a drawl, enunciating each word. He figured if he was going to give up beating Tristan in their video game and miss the satisfaction of crushing his spirit, he might as well get something in return. Owen smacked the back of Liam's head. Hey, you can't hit me, I'm your brother, Liam protested, rubbing his head. Then stop saying ridiculous things, Owen retorted before turning to Noria, who watched their exchange with an amused smile. Would you like our help, Aunt Noria? Noria nodded, her smile brightening. I'd love that, she said. Meanwhile, in the makeshift theatre room, Nathaniel lay on the bed with Arya nestled in his arms. He smiled as she let out a shaky breath, her body quivering as she burrowed deeper into his embrace. I've missed you, she whispered against his skin, her voice barely audible. I've missed you more, Nathaniel replied, pressing a tender kiss on her forehead. I'm looking forward to spending time together in your hometown. Perhaps we'll meet some of your old admirers, Nathaniel teased. Arya giggled, cupping one side of his jaw and pressing a kiss to the corner of his lips. Don't worry, most of them turned nasty in the end. You have no idea how repellent getting pregnant out of wedlock can be in a small town, she quipped. Nathaniel felt his heart constrict in his chest. Even though he already knew her full story and everything she'd endured being pregnant back in Sylvan Ridge without him, hearing it again still struck a chord of guilt and sorrow. I suppose this trip will be quite fun, he said softly. Arya chuckled, but then, as if realizing something, she raised her head to meet his eyes. How many of us are actually going, baby? And where are we going to stay? She asked with growing concern. My parents' house is just a 3-bedroom bungalow, she added with a comical cringe. Nathaniel grinned. Is it? He replied smoothly. Arya narrowed her eyes at him. What did you do, Nathan? She gasped before her expression shifted into one of suspicion. He laughed but didn't answer. A gentle knock sounded at the door, and Andrew's voice called out, Breakfast is ready, boss. Nathaniel's grin widened. Now that's a new version of Saved by the Bell, he quipped. As Arya opened her mouth to protest, Nathaniel cupped her jaw and kissed her, her words muffled against his lips, and she tried to stay focused, resisting him for all of 2 seconds before her eyes fluttered shut, surrendering to the sheer pleasure of his intoxicating kiss. When the two finally made it out, they found Andrew still waiting with Aidan. I'll alert the rest of the family, Aidan said, earning a grateful thank you from Arya as he hurried off. Taking the elevator, Aidan quickly made his way to the suite. Peering into the family living room, his eyes first landed on Noria, who was seated in a corner with the Hawthorne twins perched on the armrests of her chair. They held cue cards in their hands, and from their animated expressions, Aidan could easily guess what they were up to. A subtle smirk tugged at the corners of his lips. Miss Everly, Miss Anita, Miss Morris, the boss, is heading downstairs to the dining room now, he announced. Thanks, Aidan, the ladies replied as they began gathering their things. When Aidan turned his attention back to Noria, he caught her smiling in his direction. He gave her a quick wink, making her smile widen. Uncle Aidan, Liam called out, hopping off the chair, closely followed by Owen. Hey, buddy, Aidan greeted with a warm smile. We're going to help Aunt Noria pass her exams, Liam announced proudly, holding up the cue cards for emphasis. That sounds fantastic, Aidan replied with an easy grin, his expression laced with amusement. Meanwhile, Nathaniel and Arya met Ethan and Isla in the lobby, with Stephen trailing behind them. Morning, boss. Dr. Hawthorne? Stephen greeted the two with a warm smile. Good morning, Stephen, Arya replied promptly, while Nathaniel merely waved before turning his attention to Ethan. How are you feeling? Nathaniel asked, giving Ethan a firm pat on the chest in greeting before playfully tweaking Ila's nose, earning a bright smile from her. I'm better. Hate that I have to carry this back to Sylvan Ridge for that lunatic to see he got me, Ethan grumbled. Good morning, Arya, he added, pulling her into a quick side hug. Just give it time, my God, Arya said with exasperation as she patted him on the chest, then withdrew to embrace Isla warmly. Good morning, Dr. Hawthorne. Isla greeted shyly, her smile reflecting her appreciation for Arya's warmth. Good morning to you too. How are you feeling this morning? Arya asked, her interest genuine. I think I've improved a bit. Thanks, Isla replied hesitantly. I know you, like Ethan, want this to happen fast, like a snap of the fingers, Arya said, snapping her fingers for emphasis. But please let your body heal at its own pace. Just relax and let it happen. Ela nodded, guilt flickering across her face. With the kind of reception we have planned, I don't think anyone will have a moment to gloat about your injuries, Nathaniel said to Ethan. Don't worry. We'll see what else we can do to speed up the process when we get to Sylvan Ridge, Arya added, turning to Ela. Oh, Dr. Hawthorne, I'm not... Isla began, but Ethan cut her off. Just how many are going? Ethan asked, redirecting the conversation. Everyone, Nathaniel replied. We'll need all the help we can get with the kids. Plus, we're starting the prenuptial celebrations there, so it made sense for everyone to come. I see, Ethan muttered, reaching for Isla's hand and interlacing his fingers with hers. The elevator doors opened and the rest of the family spilled out. Alex appeared at the top of the stairs and began descending to join them. Ethan pulled Nathaniel aside as the others streamed toward the dining room. Bro, don't you think it's dangerous to bring newborns into enemy territory? Ethan asked in a low voice, his tone lined with unease. Do you want me to come with you? Nathaniel countered. Yes, Ethan admitted reluctantly. I can't go without Arya. Arya can't go without the kids. Everywhere we go, our security goes, including my lawyer. It's that simple, Nathaniel replied. Seeing Ethan's worried expression, he added firmly, my top 10 are coming with us. Add me to that mix, and no one will come close enough to hurt my family. That, I assure you. Ethan nodded, his concern easing slightly. Standing beside Ethan, Isla thought about Nathaniel's words and felt a shiver of pity for anyone foolish enough to attempt to harm the Hawthornes. Her boss's ruthlessness in protecting his family was well known. As they trudged behind the others, Ethan turned to Isla. I suppose I should tell you now. If you still want to come, just like my very hard-headed brother over there, you can. Isla tightened her hold on his hand. I want to come, she replied firmly. Ethan let out a sigh. He truly hoped they wouldn't regret any of it. And as the Hawthorne household settled down for their meal, Ms. Jones sent 5 kitchen staff and Stephen to deliver food to the concierge medical unit. The meal was intended for Tom Hill, Ms. Dawn, Anton, Jake, Dr. Hart, Dr. Rowan, Dr. Williams, Dr. Yen, Dr. Sterling, Mr. Graham, his son Tristan, and included an extra dessert for the little boy. By the time the team arrived at the unit, Jake was outside with Charles. The two assisted in distributing the food, with Jake directing one of the kitchen staff towards Mr. Graham's privacy shield. Grateful, Graham thanked the staff and Jake. He then made Tristan settle down to eat before strolling out to join the other men. Standing by Jake with food in hand, he said, The other big guy told me Ethan and Ariana are planning a trip back home to Sylvan Ridge, and that I should be getting ready to leave with them. Charles chuckled as Jake replied, You've got to be more specific. I don't know if you've noticed, but there are a lot of guys that fit that description around here. Graham gave a sheepish grin, raising his hands in mock surrender. I believe his name is MacLeod. Yeah, that's Andrew, and that's correct. We're just about ready for the trip, Jake confirmed. You'll be coming too? Graham asked, his tone filled with curiosity. It's what I signed up for, Jake replied with a smirk. That must be exciting, to get to travel frequently like that. I can't relate, Graham said with a touch of envy. I'm not going to lie, though. I'm really going to miss the food here. Jake chuckled. Tell me about it. I'm planning to steal Dr. Hawthorne and Miss Jones when I'm forced to move. Emphasis on forced, he quipped, ignoring Graham's earlier comment, suspecting it stemmed from thoughts about his wife, Pamela Anderson. Graham laughed. I seriously doubt you'll succeed in that quest. I think Hawthorne has Arya pretty much on lockdown. Charles scoffed. Oh, let him dream. Nothing wrong with dreaming, he chimed in. The other men chuckled. So Arya still cooks despite having all these people around to help? Somehow that didn't surprise me, Graham remarked, a gleam of affection in his eyes. Oh boy, she makes the most delicious pot pie. And sometimes she just decides to be adventurous, whipping up cuisine from all over the world. She's amazing, Charles praised. As he opened his food container, A delighted moan escaped him as he inhaled the mouth-watering aroma wafting up. "Damn, this smells and looks incredible," he said with genuine appreciation. Jake leaned over to peek at Charles's plate, making him scowl at him. Charles immediately moved it away from him, eliciting a burst of laughter from Jake. "Bloody food-thieving arse," Charles muttered, making the men laugh even harder. The men stood together, eating and trading jokes. Stephen soon joined them, carrying drinks to share. As he handed Jake his drink, Jake's phone chimed. He sighed, thanked Stephen, and pulled out his phone. The moment he saw the caller ID, he knew trouble was brewing. Stepping away from the group, he answered, "August, what's up?" "I've got bad news," came the solemn reply. "Let's hear it," Jake said, steeling himself, as he tried to guess what August might consider bad news. "Luke Greetham escaped," August stated. Jake's expression didn't change. "When? How?" he asked calmly. "This evening during transport from a nearby community for fieldwork," August explained. "We know Brooke's tracking him now, trying to figure out his next move. Authorities believe someone powerful helped him escape. He wasn't alone. 5 others broke out with him, all close associates," August added. "Thanks for the heads up, I appreciate it," Jake replied. "I'll update you if we learn anything more," August promised. "Thanks, man," Jake said before ending the call. He took a sip of his drink, his face bland and unreadable, then rejoined the group. "Everything good?" Charles asked. "Couldn't be better," Jake replied, his tone cold and menacing. Charles and Stephen exchanged uneasy looks. Charles watched as Jake continued to sip his drink, his cold, unyielding eyes fixed straight ahead. Charles had known Jake long enough to recognize that whoever had called him, whatever the reason, had just provoked the Punisher in him. And it rarely ended well for anyone on the receiving end. A thought nagged at Charles, making him wonder if it might be Sean Cavalier. However, he doubted Sean could be that reckless, especially considering he likely hadn't yet recovered from the beating Jake had given him days before. Still, Charles knew better than to question Jake in Justin Graham's presence. For now, he kept the conversation light, deciding to wait until Justin left to broach the subject. But soon enough, more people joined their gathering, including Dr. Sterling, Dawn, Anton, Dr. Williams, Dr. Yen, Dr. Rowan, and several nurses. Within moments, a bonfire was roaring just a few meters from the concierge medical unit. Justin helped Dr. Yen find a seat and settled next to her. The grounds quickly filled with laughter and lively debate. Jake, however, remained preoccupied with the call he'd received from August about Luke Greetham. After some time, he excused himself and walked toward the privacy shield where Evangeline was stationed. Stopping at the entrance, he peeked inside and saw her lounging on the bed, munching on snacks and listening to music. A smile spread across his lips as he watched her hum softly to herself. Not wanting to disturb her, he retreated before she noticed him and pulled out his phone to call Andrew. After the initial greetings, Jake got straight to the point. "What's Dr. Hawthorne's plan for Evangeline? Is she coming with us? Because I'd like her to." Andrew chuckled at the other end of the line. "You already know she's expected to come along, just like Tom is. We've got 3 crafts heading to Alaska, so don't worry, there's room." He paused before adding, "But tell me, why do I sense that you're agitated? You know Dr. Hawthorne wouldn't leave her or your baby unattended." Jake ran his fingers through his hair, his exasperation evident. If Andrew could pick up on his turmoil without even being physically present, he clearly wasn't doing a great job hiding it. "It's all good," Jake replied, his voice taking on a non-committal note. "Nothing I can't handle," he added, almost to himself. "All right then, see you later," Andrew said before ending the call. Jake returned to the entrance of Evangeline's privacy shield, and this time she noticed him. Her face lit up with adoration, forcing a smile out of him. Entering the room with a saunter, Jake asked, "Question, have you ever been to Alaska?" Evangeline gave him a cautious look. "No. Why?" she asked, her eyes narrowing with curiosity. "The Hawthornes are heading there, which means I have to go, and by extension, so do you," he said playfully. "Have to?" she echoed, raising an eyebrow in playful skepticism. "Did you not get the memo, Dr. Hart?" Jake teased as he reached the side of the bed, leaning over to rest his hands on it. We're one and the same now. Where I go, you go, honey, he quipped, leaning in closer to her. Evangeline, unfazed, interjected, I'm not exactly in full support of babies being on a plane for a 7-hour ride. Trust me, Jake replied with a smirk. If there's one thing I know about Nathaniel Hawthorne, it's that he thinks way ahead and ensures his family has the best of everything. How else do you think I got the BioSync womb incubator for Eli? The babies, including you, are going to be just fine, he added before pressing a kiss on her lips. He wanted to climb into bed with her just to hold her, but he knew better. Instead, he pulled a chair closer and settled into it, earning a giggle from Evangeline. Jake caught her laughing gaze and, with mock seriousness, said, It's not like I'm scared or anything. I can do whatever I want. Evangeline burst into laughter, covering her mouth as she tried to stifle it. Meanwhile, in Tom Hill's privacy shield, Bella held up her phone for Tom to see the news coverage on the Powell case. Tom immediately noticed that Nathaniel had ensured no mention was made of his kidnapping. He listened as the report detailed the charges against Christine Powell, and he let out a sigh. Although Christine had caused him unnecessary pain through her naivety, he acknowledged that she had also played a role in keeping him alive. He felt Nathaniel could have shown her some leniency, perhaps let her face some heat, but ultimately helped her push back to gain some leverage. Thinking of Theo, Tom shifted his focus to Bella. There was a young man who was brought in with me. He had multiple gunshot wounds. His name is Theodosius Duskmore. Do you know if he made it? Bella's brows furrowed as her eyes darted in recollection. I'm not sure, but I can help you find out, she offered. Please, Tom replied. He considered that if Theo had survived, the young man might be willing to help Christine gain leverage without jeopardizing himself, Tom, or the Hawthornes. Bella nodded and got up to leave. Just then, Dawn and Anton strolled in, and Tom called out to Bella, asking her to wait. He turned to Anton and asked, What happened to Theodosius Duskmore? Anton met the older man's gaze and replied, He was taken to the hospital to heal, Mr. Hill. Tom nodded thoughtfully as Bella returned to his side. Why do you want to know about Theo, Dad? Dawn asked, her tone calm but her gaze probing. Relax, girl, Tom replied, avoiding her gaze. He did help keep me alive after all. Hours later, just a few minutes before 5 in the evening, Owen grinned as his digital watch beeped. A reminder set to go off 10 minutes before his Aunt Noria's exam, start time. It's exam o'clock, Aunt Noria, he announced enthusiastically. Noria's heart slammed against her chest as she jerked upright from her seat. Arya, who had been silently observing the twins serve as study buddies to Noria all day, exchanged a smile with Nathaniel, who sat quietly in a corner working on his laptop with the triplets trolley lined up beside him. Good luck, Noria. You're going to ace it. Don't you worry, Nathaniel encouraged with a warm smile, his deep voice a reassuring hum. Arya watched as Noria fought back tears, then crossed the room to pull her into a comforting hug. Anna followed suit after Arya stepped back, and Anita joined in as well. Wishing you the very best of luck, the women echoed in unison. Before Noria could respond, Liam grabbed her wrist and shouted, Save the hugging for later, go, go, go! Noria nodded, pulling both Liam and Owen into a quick hug before thanking everyone and rushing out of the room. Has she had any formal education before? Ethan asked, his curiosity piqued. Yes, I think she stopped in senior high, Anita replied. At least that's what I heard Andrew say, she added thoughtfully. And that was way back when. Ethan pressed further. I'm not sure, Anita admitted. She's had her share of bad luck, she added with a hint of sympathy. Let's wish her a great amount of luck then, Ethan said with a hint of skepticism. Don't be negative, Arya chided him gently. I'm being realistic, Ethan replied with a shrug. Oh, there he is. Welcome back, a-hole, Alex quipped, smirking. Ethan grabbed a throw pillow and hurled it at him, but it hit Anna instead. Anna gasped dramatically. Ethan jumped up and bolted for the door, making everyone laugh. Oh, you'd better run, Blackwood, Anna growled menacingly as she rushed after him. Control your pet, Alex, Ethan shouted over his shoulder, grinning as the room erupted into laughter. Noria ran into the elevator, pressing the button to take her 3 floors down. As soon as the doors opened, she dashed out, rushing down the hallway to the old nursery room where Aidan had helped her set up a laptop earlier. She hurried inside, powered the laptop on, and tapped her feet nervously as she waited for it to boot up. Her heart pounded erratically in her chest, her entire body quivering with nervous energy. Too focused on the task at hand, she didn't notice when Aidan entered the room. His heart tightened at the sight of her anxious figure, noting the incessant tapping of her left foot and hearing her muttering under her breath. "I can do this." Aidan crossed the room and stopped behind her chair. He had wanted to wish her good luck before she started, grateful he'd arrived on time. Leaning over, he wrapped his arms around her from behind, causing her to startle. She craned her neck to look up at him, offering a nervous smile. "I came to wish you the very best of luck before you start," he said gently. Noria nodded, her body still trembling. "Remember to do your best and have fun with it. It's not a life or death affair, so you must relax, honey. Don't let anything intimidate you. Got it?" he encouraged. Noria nodded again, her resolve slightly steadier. Aidan leaned forward to help her log onto the exam website, glancing at his watch to confirm there were 5 minutes left before her test would begin. Before stepping back, he cupped her face gently and captured her lips in a slow, searing kiss. When he finally pulled away, he looked into her eyes and noted that the nervousness had been replaced with something entirely different. Her gaze lingered on his lips as she swallowed softly. "Go on, baby, have fun, and remember, I believe in you," he urged before retreating. Noria watched him leave, directing her eyes back to the laptop. She took a deep, calming breath and exhaled, steadying herself before focusing her attention on the laptop screen, which was now displaying the login page for the GED test. She entered her credentials carefully, her fingers trembling slightly on the keyboard. Once logged in, she skimmed the instructions on the screen, ensuring she understood every detail before proceeding. "Relax, Noria," she whispered to herself, steadying her hands on the desk. The timer at the top corner of the screen showed 2 minutes until the test began. She adjusted her chair, placed her palms flat on the desk, and closed her eyes for a moment, reliving the studying session with Liam and Owen, Dr. Hart, and Aidan. When the first question appeared, Noria read it carefully, noting that the problem-solving section required her to calculate percentages and analyze data sets. She hesitated briefly, then began jotting down notes on the scrap paper Aidan had left by the laptop. As she worked through the equations, tackling them one after the other, her heart continued to hammer hard and fast in her chest, as if it was about to expire. Next, she moved to the reading comprehension section. Her eyes darted in their sockets as she quickly scanned the passage with great care. She recalled the strategies Owen and Liam had taught her earlier, highlighting key phrases and eliminating incorrect answers. She smiled briefly at the memory of their energetic pep talks, feeling a small boost of motivation. As she progressed, the minutes blurred together. The writing section required her to compose an essay. She paused, recalling Dr. Hart's advice to structure it into 3 parts. An introduction to introduce the topic and thesis, body paragraphs to support her arguments with evidence, and a conclusion to summarize and restate her position. She typed the introduction, clearly presenting her stance. Moving to the body, she ensured each paragraph began with a topic sentence and flowed logically with examples. Halfway through, Noria's nerves returned momentarily. She glanced at the timer and noticed she was slightly behind schedule. Taking another deep breath, she pushed forward, determined not to let doubt creep in. By the time the final section, science, appeared, Noria felt a mix of exhaustion and determination. She carefully analyzed graphs, interpreted experiments, and applied critical thinking to answer each question. The countdown timer ticked down to the final minute as she reviewed her answers one last time, ensuring she hadn't missed anything. When the test ended, the screen displayed a confirmation message. Noria leaned back in her chair, exhaling deeply. Her chest rose and fell as a wave of relief washed over her. "You did it," she whispered, her voice shaky and tinged with disbelief. "You actually did it, Noria." She began to sob, burying her face in her hands. Quiet cries escaped her, her shoulders trembling with each sob that racked through her body. "God, please let me pass, please. I need this." she whispered between sobs. Moments later, Aidan re-entered the room and paused, seeing her tear-streaked face. He opened his arms and she stood, running into his embrace. He lifted her off the ground, holding her tightly. "How did it go?" he asked softly. Noria nodded against his chest, her voice muffled as she replied, "I did everything." "Good. Now we wait," he said, his voice soothing. "The results should be out in 3 days or so. Meanwhile, what do you think about accompanying me to Alaska?" Despite her tears, Noria giggled as he nuzzled his face into the curve of her neck. "I'd love to," she replied, her voice still trembling with emotion. "I should go and give Liam and Owen feedback," Noria said with a bright smile. "I think they'd like to know their coaching helped." Aidan chuckled in response. Meanwhile, outside the concierge medical unit, the crowd continued to grow as the day progressed. Soon enough, Andrew, Aidan, Will, Ash, Adam, Anita, and Noria, along with a few of the Hawthorne guards who were off duty, joined the group. The kitchen supplied drinks, including an array of high-end wines and spirits, as more non-security personnel joined in on the fun. Adam found himself seated next to Dr. Yen. His gaze landed on the half-empty bottle of Chateau Margaux in front of her, and he wondered if she knew its deceptively sweet taste belied its high alcohol content. The prestigious, velvety wine was known for catching unsuspecting drinkers off guard, and Adam, in his own overconfidence, had once fallen victim to it. Leaning toward her, he said, "You should take it easy with the wine. It usually kicks in when you least expect it." His tone was light and playful. "I think your warning came a little too late," the doctor replied with a flirtatious grin, making Adam chuckle. "Better late than never," he responded with a shrug, noticing how the doctor gazed intently into his eyes. "I appreciate your attempt to save me, sir," she quipped. Adam laughed in return. More drinks kept coming, and the gathering lasted until 3 a.m. in the early morning. Sometime later, Yen's eyes flickered open. She found herself in a room, on a bed that wasn't the one assigned to her, a warm, large body pressed against her back, and it slowly dawned on her that she was completely naked in bed, and so was the person beside her. "Seriously, Yen," she silently admonished herself as she slowly turned to see who she had ended up in bed with, and the ache between her legs showed they'd truly gone above and beyond. 4 days after Noria's GED test, Nathaniel woke Arya with a lingering kiss, a gesture that stretched her lips into a smile as he continued to pepper kisses all over her face. "Is it me? Or are you far more excited to be visiting Sylvan Ridge than Ethan and me?" Arya quipped, her voice raspy from just waking up. "Oh, you'd be excited too if you knew what I had planned," he replied, a teasing lilt in his tone. Arya giggled, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. She cupped his jaw and, peering adoringly into his eyes, said, "Good morning, handsome." Nathaniel felt his heart clench with emotions so profound they left him momentarily breathless. "Good morning, my love," Nathaniel replied, his voice deeper than usual, heavy with the emotions she stirred in him. His heart raced with a twinge of fear at the thought of a time when she might stop looking at him like that, as if he were the most precious thing in her world. "Are you happy, baby?" he asked, his eyes darkening with sudden intensity. Arya met his gaze, her beautiful eyes searching his. Slowly she lifted her head from the pillow and pressed her mouth to his, parting his lips with the tip of her tongue. His breathing quickened as she explored the depths of his mouth with deliberate tenderness. "Ariana," Nathaniel moaned as she sat up, still kissing him fervently. She eased him onto his back, straddling him with an air of quiet dominance that made his broad chest heave with growing need. Leaning over him, her face so close it felt as though she could see into his very soul, she whispered, "I could come back to this world 1,000,000 times, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and I would still want the sole right to do this to you." Her whispered words ignited something primal in him. Grabbing her by the nape of her neck, he pulled her into a kiss, possessive and impassioned, that brought tears to her eyes. "You're saying you're mine in 1,000,000 incarnations, Ariana Hawthorne," he murmured, his voice a low growl. "Yes," Ariana breathed, her tone filled with complete submission. "As I am yours," Nathaniel whispered against her lips, his voice trembling with devotion. Ariana shivered in his loving embrace. A while later, Nathaniel joined Ariana, Miss Everly, Anna, Anita, and Noria to prepare the babies, including the twins. Nathaniel overheard Liam telling Noria that the GED results had to come out that day, or else he was going to write a petition. "I'll have everyone in the world sign it against whoever is in charge. I don't know how many more days I can take," Liam said, placing a dramatic hand over his chest. Nathaniel looked away, suppressing a chuckle so they wouldn't notice he'd overheard. "Or I could have my Uncle Jake march in there and demand to know the result," Liam added. "You really trust that your Uncle Jake can pull off anything, don't you?" Noria teased, smiling. "Oh, yeah. He can do anything. Plus, I'm his favorite in the whole world," Liam replied confidently, gesturing with his hands. Owen scoffed, earning a shove from Liam. Noria giggled and gently pulled Owen away before he could retaliate. "I'm sure he loves you two equally, just like I love you two equally," Noria said warmly. "You know it's not actually possible to love two people equally, though, Aunt Noria," Owen countered with a note of knowledge. Liam groaned and facepalmed. "Dude, she said that to make you feel better," he muttered. "Chop chop, boys, less talking, more getting dressed," Arya interrupted, her tone firm but playful. Nathaniel chuckled quietly to himself before walking across the room to join the boys, helping speed up the process of getting them dressed. About 3 hours later, given the size of each aircraft, the group heading to Alaska had to be transported from the estate to the Hawthorne hangar at the airport to board the planes. Nathaniel, Ariana, Liam, and Owen, along with the triplets, Ms. Everly, Anna, Anita, Andrew, Isla, Ethan, Alex, Tom, Dawn, Bella, Anton, Aidan, Noria, Justin, Graham, Tristan, Dr. Hart, and Jake, comprised the last group to leave the estate. By the time they arrived at the airport, there was little waiting time before they were cleared for departure. This group, along with Dr. Williams, boarded the same plane. Noria initially thought she would be leaving on the second plane, where Dr. Sterling, Dr. Yen, Dr. Rowan, Stephen, Adam, Will, Ash, Charles, Miss Jonas, and about 15 more Hawthorne guards were. But as she veered toward that aircraft, Liam and Owen spotted her and yelled, "Aunt Noria, this way?" Aidan chuckled as the boys ran to grab her, pulling her back towards their own plane. Once everyone was settled in, Liam, Owen, and Tristan began moving from cabin to cabin and seat to seat to ensure everyone was accounted for. The two boys grinned when they spotted Dr. Hart lounging in one of the cabins. "Don't I get a hug?" Dr. Hart asked with a smile, and the boys eagerly took turns hugging her. As they hurried away, Evangeline overheard them whispering about how she wouldn't be able to run away in Sylvan Ridge with the baby, since the area would be buried in snow. Their imaginative scenarios made her giggle quietly to herself. The boys continued down the aircraft aisle until Liam called out, "Where's Grandpa Hill?" "I'm in here, boys," Tom's voice came from a room down the aisle. A door opened and Miss Bella waved the boys over. They hurried toward her and peered inside. Liam and Owen hadn't seen their Grandpa Hill since his encounter with the Powells, and during the chaotic journey from the house. Tom had come in a different Jeep with Dr. Hart, Jake, Dr. Sterling, and Dr. Yen, arriving at the airport ahead of the others. Now, seeing him again, although he looked far better than he had a few days ago, the telltale signs of his ordeal were still etched on his face. The boys stared at him in silent horror. "What happened to you, Grandpa Hill?" Liam exclaimed, his eyes brimming with tears. "All come here, you two," Tom said softly as Bella helped guide the boys to him. He drew them into a loose hug, his body still tender from the healing process. "Did you get into a fight?" Owen asked, his young mind scrutinizing Tom's appearance, trying to piece together why his Grandpa Hill looked so beaten up. He remembered that just a couple of days ago, their Aunt Dawn had looked like she'd been in a fight too. "No, I didn't," Tom replied, offering a vague but reassuring explanation. "I had an encounter with a bad guy, but we still won." Liam touched Tom's bruised face, his lips trembling as tears welled up again. Tom's heart constricted, and he tightened his embrace around the boy. Bella, watching from the side, had tears streaming down her face. She was deeply moved by the way the boys treated Tom, as if he were their blood grandfather. It warmed her heart that he got to experience this connection, that they both got to experience the connection with the little ones. After the boys left Tom's cabin, Tristan whispered just loud enough for the twins to hear, "I know what someone who got beat up looks like. Someone beat him up." His voice was laced with firm conviction. Owen and Liam exchanged a look, A silent agreement passing between them, they decided to find their Uncle Jake and Uncle Andrew. If anyone could figure out who had hurt their Grandpa Hill and make them pay, it would be those two. The boys wandered towards the front of the craft and found Uncle Jake with Uncle Andrew, Uncle Aidan, and Uncle Anton standing just outside the cockpit entrance. "Whoa, are you two crying?" Jake asked as he noticed their tear-streaked faces. "Okay, I'm going to need names," Aidan chimed in, concern in his voice. "What's wrong, boys?" Andrew probed gently, his interest piqued. "They're sad because someone beat up their Grandpa Hill," Tristan explained solemnly, his tone laced with resignation. "He wouldn't tell us who, though," Liam added, his lips quivering. "I think it's the same person who fought with Aunt Dawn," Owen said, his angry gaze fixed on the men. "Can you help us find out who did it?" The intensity in Owen's voice and stance made Jake pause, a fleeting thought crossing his mind. Owen was going to grow up to be a formidable man, just like his father. Unlike Liam, whose emotions shone as sadness, Owen seemed to channel his feelings directly into anger. Jake crouched to their eye level, looking between Owen and Liam. "What if I told you it's already taken care of?" he said gently. "And not only that," Anton added with a grin, "your Aunt Dawn got to kick some serious butt for payback." Owen exchanged a glance with Liam as if silently confirming whether they were satisfied with that answer. After a moment, the twins nodded, their shoulders relaxing just a little. Tristan tried his best not to show fear at Liam and Owen's uncle's responses. He figured he might be small, but he'd seen enough movies to recognize the phrase, "taken care of." In those films, it usually meant getting rid of a rival or enemy permanently. He was pretty sure that's what it meant here too. Liam and Owen's uncles were big, intimidating men, and Tristan couldn't help but recall a conversation he'd overheard between his mom and a friend. His mom had said, "A man with nothing to hide doesn't need as many bodyguards as the Hawthornes have." She even speculated that Liam and Owen's dad might be a mafia boss. At first, Tristan thought she might be right, but after spending time with the Hawthorne family, he wasn't so sure. He hadn't seen anyone get their body parts cut off like in the movies, although he had noticed that Liam and Owen's dad rarely smiled, much like the stern mafia bosses he'd seen on TV. What changed his mind the most, though, was Owen and Liam's mum. She helped treat him when he was sick, making sure he was well again. That didn't seem like something a cold-hearted mafia family would do. Even if the Hawthornes were involved in something dangerous, Tristan figured being friends with Owen and Liam was the safest bet. As long as they liked him, there wouldn't be any reason to have him taken care of, a prospect Tristan was more than okay with. Meanwhile, in the second craft, Claire, sitting next to Yen, noticed that Yen had her face hidden behind a magazine, holding it high enough to cover most of her face, which was already covered with oversized sunglasses. She lounged in her chair like a celebrity trying to hide from rabid fans, shrinking further into the seat each time a group of Hawthorne guards strode past, ensuring everyone was settled for takeoff. When Charles walked by with Will and Stephen, Yen cowered even lower, practically trying to disappear into the chair. Claire, who had had enough, snatched the magazine from her. Yen gasped, her mouth agape, as Claire leaned closer, scowling. "All right, spit it out. What's going on, and why are you acting like you want to disappear and merge with the seat?" Yen quickly covered Claire's mouth as her voice rose in volume. "Pipe down, damn it!" she hissed in a forceful whisper. "Spill it now!" Claire demanded, her glare fierce and unwavering. Yen sighed, glancing around nervously to ensure no one was close enough to overhear. Satisfied, she leaned in, whispering, "Remember that night when the guys started a bonfire outside the concierge medical unit?" Claire furrowed her brows, trying to recall. "What about it?" Yen sighed again, lowering her voice further. "Apparently I got really drunk." Claire's expression cleared as realization dawned. She had seen the beginning of that night's chaos. "Yes, I saw when Justin offered to walk you back to your apartment," Claire said, her tone laced with curiosity. "Oh, God," Yen groaned, burying her face in her hands. "What happened? Did you know, with him?" Claire asked, her eyes wide with intrigue. "I think I kissed him," Yen admitted, her voice muffled by her hands, as if the confession pained her. "Okay, a kiss. That's hardly terrible. You're an adult," Claire reasoned. "Oh, it didn't end there," Yen said, peeking out from behind her hands with comical horror. He wasn't the only one I kissed, and I didn't end up in bed with Justin. Claire's eyes widened even further before she burst into giggles, quickly covering her mouth to stifle the sound. Girl, who did you end up with? She asked in a playful drawl, leaning closer. 4 days earlier, around 2 a.m., Yen began to feel the effects of the wine Adam had warned her about. She wanted to say goodnight and leave, but as she sat there, the world around her started to blur like a mirage. She feared that getting up might make it worse. It would have been much easier if Adam was still sitting beside her, but he had excused himself earlier to take a call. She considered asking Claire for help, but Claire was too far away, and Yen didn't want to shout drunkenly across the field. So, she waited, hoping Adam would return at some point. She wasn't sure if she had dozed off, but the next thing she felt was her head resting on a shoulder. Startled, she raised her head with an apology, but the voice that responded didn't sound like Adam's. Yen blinked and turned to see Justin sitting beside her. Oh, I'm so sorry, she managed to whisper. It's okay, if you're tired, I could walk you to your room, he offered. Yen hesitated. Even though she was tipsy, something in her went on a high alert. If she had all her faculties working properly, she would have said no. She was beginning to feel a growing attraction to Adam and had been hoping he would be the one to accompany her to her assigned apartment. She could also sense that Justin wanted to get closer to her, judging by the peculiar way he would look at her, a gaze that hinted at his own interest. She figured she shouldn't give him the wrong idea, but now, intoxicated and mentally subdued, she didn't want to reject his gentlemanly offer outright. So she nodded with a polite smile and said, Sure, thanks. Justin stood and helped her to her feet, her sneaker-clad toes pressing steadily onto the ground. He held her close to his side as Yen leaned into him for support. Together they left the gathering, heading toward a path that led to the guest condo, where the other doctors were staying. Looks like you really enjoyed your night out here, Justin said, glancing down at her. Yen wasn't sure, but she thought she heard herself giggle. A ridiculous reaction to such a simple comment. Her muddled, tipsy mind interpreted it as teasing, or perhaps he had teased her, but she couldn't tell. Looking up at him with a hazy smile, she said, It's wild that these people get to live like this, huh? Justin chuckled. Tell me about it. I'm more than comfortable back home with my own very adequate abode, yet I find myself wishing I could stay longer. My son seems less angry and well-behaved here, and he's got Liam and Owen to play with. It's kind of a wholesome way of living. It's crazy to think we're still in a freaking city, he said. Yen could hear him talking and thought she could discern what he was saying, but the overwhelming urge to close her eyes and drift off to oblivion was stronger than her attempt to be polite and stay alert. She was sure she blacked out for a second because suddenly she felt herself falling, like she had misstepped and was drawing towards the ground. Strong arms caught her before she hit the snow. She blinked her eyes open and found Justin leaning close, his face mere inches away, his breath warm as he said, Christ, I'm sorry. I was babbling on and almost made you fall. I was supposed to be helping. A sheepish smile animated his face. Yen thought he looked quite attractive, his adorable smile and calm demeanor unexpectedly endearing. You have beautiful brown eyes, Yen whispered with a smile. Justin watched her heavy-lidded eyes sweep from his own to his lips, the movement slow and deliberate. It was as if that small, flirtatious glance sent a thrill of electricity rushing through him. When she leaned closer to his lips, he instinctively closed the distance and kissed her. Her response was a slow, lazy kiss, almost as if she were testing the boundaries to see how he tasted. The deliberate, languid pace made Justin's body hum to life. He wasn't sure how long they kissed, maybe 2 minutes, but then he heard a voice calling out, Dad! Tristan's voice startled him. Justin instantly drew back, causing Yen to lose her balance and tumble into the snow. Damn it, Justin cursed as he reached to help her up. Yen burst into giggles. I'm so sorry, he apologized, pulling her to her feet. Yen waved off the apology. It's okay, she said, still giggling. Dad? Tristan called again, his voice louder and closer now. I'm so sorry, Justin repeated in a fervent whisper. It's okay, go on, attend to him. I'm sure I can make it from here. Yen reassured him. Are you sure? Justin asked, his concern obvious. The house is just straight down this lane, Yen replied, as she started walking with determined strides, waving to him over her shoulder. Justin lingered, the warmth of her lips still fresh on his mind, wishing they hadn't been interrupted. When Tristan called out for the third time, he snapped out of it and hurried off, following the sound of his voice. Yen, meanwhile, continued walking, or so she thought. Keeping her eyes open was a struggle, but she focused on moving straight ahead. Internally, she berated herself for not heeding Adam's warning about that fancy drink. But no, she had to prove she was capable and sophisticated, even though it was probably the first time she'd tried something so deceptively sweet. I should have reached the house by now, she thought, blinking away the haze and looking around, only to find herself in a wooded area where the snow had piled several layers thick. How do they even get trees up here, she muttered, sighing as she pressed on. After a while, she stopped and scanned her surroundings, but the house was nowhere in sight. She could still faintly hear voices and laughter, but they sounded much farther away. Great. Getting lost here would be so embarrassing, she muttered, taking a step forward, only to sink face first into a deep snowdrift. This can't be happening, she groaned, shivering as the cold seeped through her clothes like tiny needles. Imagine dying like this. That would be a real laugh at my wake. My parents would never live it down, she mumbled, letting out a soft, ironic laugh at her predicament. Dr. Yen, headstrong, independent, too good for advice, found frozen on an estate in New York. What a way to go, she murmured, giggling as she let herself sink into the absurdity of the situation. Rolling onto her back, she began making a snow angel, flapping her arms and legs while the icy chill burrowed into her body, making her tremble. Is this some kind of planned activity, Dr. Yen? A deep male voice called out, cutting through the stillness. Yen blinked, startled, her breath catching as she squinted up at a tall, shadowed figure looming over her. The voice stirred something familiar in her, but she couldn't quite place it. I think I got lost, she admitted with a lopsided, sheepish grin. A rich chuckle resonated in the cold air. You don't say, he replied. Help me, she whispered faintly, reaching out as the figure bent down to lift her shivering body from the snow. Oh dear, you're trembling, he said with concern. Yen was beyond grateful to find a source of warmth. She snuggled closer. Seeking it like a moth drawn to a flame, she burrowed into his strong embrace, rubbing her face against the exposed skin of his neck, desperate to soak up every bit of heat. Easy now, let's get you warmed up, he said softly. Yen felt herself being moved, cradled in his arms, and she instinctively latched onto his sturdy, warm frame like a monkey clinging to a tree. She didn't care where he was taking her as long as she could stay wrapped in his comforting embrace. And his scent. Oh, his scent. He smelled fresh like a summer night after a soft rain, clean and inviting. Something in the back of her mind tugged at her, as if trying to spark a memory, but she was too tired, too intoxicated. The combination of the alcohol and being so close to such a strong, manly presence sent her thoughts spiraling into unholy territory. She heard the sound of a door opening, followed by a loud sigh. The air shifted. It felt warmer, no longer biting at her skin. She was sure they were in an enclosed space now. The warmth caressed her face, a welcome reprieve from the cold. But even then, when the male voice said, "You can let go now, Dr. Yen," she refused to release him. Instead, she clung tighter, her body pressing against his. She didn't stop rubbing her cheek against his neck, her breathing growing shallow and uneven. Turning her face slightly, her lips brushed lightly against his skin. "Dr. Yen, you need to please stop," he said, his voice dropping an octave, now low and gruff with tension. Yen moaned softly, her left hand slipping from under his jacket to cup his jaw. She tilted her face upward and captured his lips in a fierce, passionate kisses that made his body tremble. "Oh shit," she heard him breathe. "Dr. Yen," he called in a strained drawl, but she silenced him by deepening the kiss, her tongue sliding into his mouth as she nibbled on the soft flesh of his lips. Her breathing became ragged as she pressed herself closer, her hips beginning to rock against him. With one hand, she fumbled to loosen the buttons of her bodice, then afterward reached for his belt. All the while, she kissed him with an intensity that drew groans from him. Whether in protest or pleasure, she couldn't tell. "Oh boy, we need to apply the brakes now," he said, his voice thick with warning and desire. "I need you now," she whispered, her voice trembling with urgency. "Are you sure?" he finally asked, cupping one side of her neck. "Yes, please, please," she breathed. After that simple yet crucial word of consent, Yen felt the tide shift so fast and intensely that she forgot to breathe. Her back was pressed against a hard surface as he lowered his face to her chest, trapping her in place. What she had sought as mere heat turned into the scorching embrace of the sun, and she was burned in ways that left her breathless. When she woke the following morning in an unfamiliar room, she turned her head, only to gasp audibly at the sight and feel of him behind her. Her unclothed body lay pressed against his, and her heart slammed hard against her ribcage as his identity became clear. "Oh heavens," she muttered in awe. Him lying there just as unclothed as she was the most beautifully reckless sight she'd ever seen. For a moment, all she could do was stare, her eyes trailing down his massive form. But then worry set in. What would he think of her? And had he brought her to the Hawthorne guard's apartment? His apartment? The thought of others seeing her there made her cheeks flush with embarrassment. She carefully settled back, holding her breath as she began to slowly and cautiously disengage from his large frame, hoping to slip away before he woke. But just as she started to move, his strong arm wrapped around her, pulling her back against him. His face nestled into the curve of her neck, and he used one leg to part her legs. Yen froze, unsure if he was awake or still asleep. Judging by his steady breathing, she guessed he was likely still sleeping. Soon enough, she felt him take her again, her body responding to the mix of pleasure and discomfort. If she'd been too drunk to remember just how wild their first time had been, she now knew. He had her moaning and panting all over again, and the intensity was undeniable, even though he was still asleep. Much later, when she finally managed to disengage herself from him, Yen glanced around for her clothes. Her eyes landed on her torn panties by the door, and she silently gasped. Looking around at the state of her remaining garments, she ended up borrowing a pair of his joggers and a hoodie. She hastily gathered her clothes, including the ruined panties, and snuck out. It wasn't easy walking, let alone running, after a long, passionate night with a man who stood 6 feet 5 inches tall and wielded a rather intimidating arsenal below the belt. Pulling the hoodie over her head, and with the haze of intoxication finally cleared from her eyes, she made her way back to her assigned apartment. Once inside, she rushed to the bathroom and took a long, hot shower. Standing in front of the mirror afterward, she stared at her reflection, her face flushing crimson red. "Oh my God," she groaned, covering her face with her hands. The thought of running away crossed her mind, but she knew it would mean quitting her job at Evergreen Memorial Hospital, and she wasn't about to throw her career away because of one crazy night, whatever one would even call what she'd experienced with that gigantic man. No, she decided. She wasn't going to run. She'd be brave and do the only logical thing, hide. However, upon arriving at the concierge medical unit, she spotted Justin Graham drinking coffee and chatting with Jake Darfield. Yen immediately tried to figure out how to avoid the two men, but there was no escape route. Resolving to hold her head high, she strode past them, acting as normal as she could possibly manage. "Good morning, Mr. Darfield, Mr. Graham," she greeted with a bright smile, determined to move past quickly. "Ah, morning, Dr. Yen," Jake Darfield replied with a polite smile. "Good morning, Dr. Yen," Justin said, his warm smile carrying a suggestiveness that made her feel very, very uncomfortable. Later during the ward round, Yen entered the privacy shield where he was with Tristan. She completed her examination and administered his son's medication. As she removed her used gloves and reached for the trash can, he stepped behind her and said in a low, suggestive voice, "I thought after that kiss yesterday we'd move past addressing each other so formally, Dr. Yen." Yen froze. So waking up in a stranger's bed wasn't the only unholy thing she'd done yesterday. She managed to turn around to face him, flashed a quick smile, and gestured toward the exit of the shield without saying a word. Then she hurried away. The poor thing had looked concerned, and even more so when Yen did everything possible to avoid stopping to discuss the kiss with him. Throughout the day, her mind kept repeating like a mantra that she needed this job at Evergreen Memorial Hospital. Working alongside Dr. Everly Hawthorne was the biggest career opportunity of her life, and she wouldn't jeopardize it over a kiss or a one-night stand. What she hadn't anticipated was being added to the team of doctors accompanying Dr. Hawthorne and her family to Alaska. It was supposed to be a working vacation, and Yen wasn't about to deny herself that opportunity. While she was relieved she wasn't placed in the same aircraft as Justin Graham, she couldn't entirely escape her behemoth either. When she boarded the plane, she felt the weight of his intense, dark, hooded stare. Yen was immensely grateful she'd chosen to wear sunglasses. Even with them, the power of his gaze nearly made her trip. She'd done everything she could to avoid him up until now, but now there was no avoiding it. They were both trapped on a 7-hour flight to a remote town for a work holiday in Justin Graham's hometown. Claire swatted Yen playfully on the shoulder, snapping her out of her reverie. "Tell me, damn it," Claire demanded impatiently. "It's Will," Yen whispered, her cheeks reddening as Claire's eyes widened. "I thought you had your sights set on Adam," Claire whispered back, surprised. "Yeah," Yen replied with a note of shame sinking deeper into her seat. "He took me so many times I could hardly walk," she added with a look of comical horror. Claire bit her lower lip, her eyes sparkling with mischief as she tried to stifle a laugh. "Don't you dare laugh," Yen whispered fervently. "I'm not laughing," Claire replied, though her hand flew to her mouth as she burst out laughing. Yen smacked her on the back, making Claire shake with laughter, her whole body quivering with it. When Claire finally straightened, her eyes were blurred with tears and she glanced at Yen. Their gazes met and the two of them burst into laughter again. "Stop it, Claire," Yen admonished fiercely, though a smile tugged at her lips.